are live. Boyo. Fucking alert. I'm here with Shaolin monk Zhānmǔsī Doalīn. How are you, Zhānmǔsī Doalīn?
Konnichiwa, Stephen's son.
Konnichiwa is Japanese.
Your name is Steve if you translate it, because Stefan, or maybe you're not meant to use your real name anymore. You're going one of those anonymous boyos. Take Stefan and you put it into English, the best language. It literally becomes Stephen. So from now on, how are you doing, Stevie boy? You doing having a good time there? Having a good time in the old crack in Ireland?
I'm just gonna call you racist from now on for getting konnichiwa. That was so naughty. I think that means goodbye as well. So you were just like, here's Chinese James, and you're just like goodbye in the wrong language.
I know nothing about Chinese or Japanese except they built a nice wall and they used to cut their guts out every time they did something mildly inappropriate. Which, to be honest, I can get down with. That was quite honorable.
That'd be like
what about chow? Is that Chinese chow?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think it is chow. What just happened there? Where that'd be like if I said, "Oh, here's a German guy called some bloke called I don't know, Jacob J-Man or something like that," and then you're like, "Au revoir."
Wait, au revoir. You mean Auf Wiedersehen?
Yeah, but you said it in fucking Japanese, so you're like another name.
I don't know this.
Hello.
I only speak English. Thank you very much. So goodbye, Stefan. End of stream. Thank you all for tuning in for today's episode. I really appreciate you.
Boy, fucking alert, people. I'm here with James, and we're talking about racism already. It's happened. We've gone all the way down that rabbit hole. Let's talk about the Asians. Let's move away from Aion. This is now called the Aion. This is what we're moving into now. It's the new name of it. We're here to talk about dreams. Actually, we're going to open up this big lecture on the wonderful concept of the Messiah, the seat of the self that we've been riffing on more. We're going to go deeper into it again. And after our endeavor into the Antichrist, we're going to talk about why Jesus sits where he sits. And then we're going to start first with a dream. We're going to first start with a dream we got in our Discord. So I'm going to read it, and then myself and James are going to give our spin on it because we find it a very fascinating one. James, you good to go? Anything to say, sir?
Oh shit! I'm 100% good to go.
Okay,
just
excellent.
Yeah, go for it. We're looking forward to this. Go for it.
So this is a dream from a dude called McDonald. The world has been taken over by black humanoid monsters, and the city in which I live is getting attacked. Surrounding the city, there are 3 separate walls. The monsters have already breached the first one. And when they start attacking the second one, I get an idea that I should climb up the wall and then walk to the opposite side in order to get away from the monsters. The walls were quite thick, which made it possible to walk on them at the top. At this time, I also noticed that there is another person accompanying me, although I am unable to make out who it is. Once we get up and walk a couple of meters, I realize that the top has been swarmed by the monsters. I decide to run back the way we came, but unfortunately that side has also become swarmed with monsters. In spite of this, me and my companions start running in that direction and in some way fall off the wall and survive. Of course, the monsters follow us down, and I decide that killing myself is a better end than getting mauled to pieces by the monsters, so I put a sword to my throat and cut it. While I'm bleeding out, I see one of my classmates being hoisted down on a platform to save us. However, he can only lift one of us along with him up to safety. Even though I'm bleeding out, I think that I might be saved in some way, so I reach for his hand. But it would end up being in vain, since my companion managed to grip his hand before me. Suddenly, I'm seized by an immense feeling of anxiety, which remains until I bleed out and die. And then I wake up. Jimmy Boyo, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really terrifying dream. This is the thing going on the Discord stuff that we're doing. Some of the dreams are ridiculously psychedelic, like unbelievable. Some of the ones I've been having as well and dropping them in there. It's like, what the hell is going on? But that's actually quite a similar dream to one I have. I'm gonna before I interpret that, I'm gonna drop a few things. I often have dreams where like there's something chasing me, some kind of monster, and it's usually quite an interesting thing. I'm more interested in it than terrified, I'd say. And then rather than actually confront the monster, I will scream really loudly to attention, and then it kills me. Because and this always happens. I never confront it. I always just scream. It's like, what the hell's that? And then the dream restarts itself like a video game, as if to say, no, try again. And then I just can't do it. It's like, you know that scene in Jurassic Park where like they're like the little kids are like sitting in the kitchen and the velociraptors are walking around coming after them. If that was me, I'd just scream and get it over and done with. But there's always some kind of escape that I try to do. So what this guy's doing, this McDonald lad, I don't know if that's your real name, that there's things coming for you, things from the darkness, monsters. And it's always difficult to know specifically what they represent. But rather than confront them heroically, whatever they happen to represent, you've cut yourself and killed yourself. So this could be you're cutting yourself off completely from them, or it could be that you're cutting your voice out, perhaps, because you cut your throat, your voice is there. So you're like, it's I believe you dropped this in, Stefan, when you first started talking, or Stevie Boy, when you started talking about this dream originally, was maybe you're not being authoritarian in your speech. Your speech is weak. You're not embodying the logos properly. So you're actually cutting out your voice rather than connect with those creatures that are coming towards you, rather than confronting them properly. Because what's the hero going to do? He's supposed to confront the monsters and take them out, not cut your throat and watch yourself die. I need to go sort my dog out. You give your interpretation. Okay, cool.
Jimmy Boyo is gonna go cut some dog's throat if you're not careful. We should watch him in case he does dodgy things. Look at this fucker. Look at him. He's like going to kill like a fucking cowboy. Anyway, people, my spin on this, I've got a few things to say about this, of course, and this again comes down to this idea of symbols. So what we're doing here with a dream is we're breaking down symbols. We're getting into this unconscious. We're looking at the way the unconscious produces ideas, and we're going with this premise that these ideas have knowledge within them. They somehow have meaning. They somehow have sense. They somehow have something that you can extract out of them. And I always say it's almost like you're getting presented a movie written by your own personal Shakespeare. And if you can interpret the symbols in the movie, you can actually get an insight, a new perspective into your reality that does actually help you. This is why I tell people that dream reading's legit, man. Like, you don't need to get all woo-woo about it. It's very, very straightforward. It's almost like a different version of thinking that will help you reframe your problems, because a lot of your problems are down to a failure in framing. You know, like you might see not having any money as like, I'm never going to be successful. But you could say, okay, now instead you could reframe it as saying, now I have unlimited motivation. It's like, because I've nothing to lose, now I have everything to gain. That's like a simple little mindset shift about your reality that will change your attitude, change your actions, and change your life for that type of reason. So dreams have that ability to do that in like a way more complicated and broader scale, but it can even be that simple. And so this dream where you're getting chased by monsters actually happened to me. And James was talking about a recurring dream where you were getting chased by a monster and it kills you when you wake up. And it keeps happening, almost as if to say, you're going to have to keep facing this monster until you defeat it. It's like a video game, as you were saying. And this happened to me one point when I was reading my dreams heavy. And I came to one particular dream was the apotheosis of this archetype of this idea. This archetype of getting chased by a monster is archetypal. It does happen a lot. And it's often related to that inception idea of dream within a dream, repeated dreams. You know, you're stuck in a loop. It's that type of idea, because it always seems like you're running away from something. So I was running away from this monster. I didn't know what was going on, but it was like a fear demon of sorts. And in this particular dream, I think I decided that what I was going to do is I was going to escape. So I turned around and I faced it, and it jumped on me and then bit into my ear. And then I leaped out of the dream. I woke up now into another dream. But what happens is, symbolically, I pulled the fear demon out of the dream with me. And when I did that into the waking state, I saw it for what it really was, a dream monster, implying that it's just a figment of my imagination. It's just an illusion. And there it clicked to me. I was like, fear is just in your head. Fear is just something that evaporates when you actually confront it properly. And after I did that, I stopped having that repetitive dream. And I started realizing that the best way to deal with your fears is to go face your fears. So I think underneath those ideas of repetitive dreams, it is about confrontation with a monster. And the monster is usually some type of emotional trauma of some sorts. You're getting chased by a monster. It's usually a manifestation of something you've repressed, such as your fear or your fear of facing your fear, you know? So it's something quite meta like that. And then my breakdown of this chap here is that he, like, you have these black humanoid monsters, these zombies, these demons, these automatons, and they seem like to me they could be eros, they could be your emotions of some sort, they could be your fear of conflict. So this guy is in high school and he has, like, you know, a lot of, shall we say, non-politically correct non-politically correct perspectives, and he's afraid of speaking them out because everybody will turn on him. And so what happens in your head there, like we could say if you were to write a movie about that scene, is that all your friends are secretly monsters and they're reflecting back on you your fear of confronting them and saying, this is what I think, your fear of asserting your personality. So this dude, it seems like he's having this dream where he's like, okay, I don't feel like I have a voice, I don't feel like I have status, I don't feel like I have a personality, because you're going through that stage when you're in high school, and then all these figures around me are aggressive towards me, and you could say that the city is his kingdom, is like his society, his school. And so in order for him to become a person, to get lifted up into the higher status level, like that companion that was lifting people up at the end, in order for him to do that, and in order for him to release his voice, he would have to confront these monsters and say, this is who I am. And a part of saying this is who I am is saying this is what I think. And so he's incredibly afraid of it, like he should be, because it's fucking scary going against the grain. Like back in the day, if you said, oh, you know, I'm not too sure about this god we all worship in the tribe there, they'd be like, Jesus, we've got someone we can sacrifice to the god all of a sudden. So you've got those instincts still in you where you're like freaking out all the time. You're like, I don't know, I don't want to go against the grain at all. And when you do, they turn into a manifestation of your fear to confront darkness, terror, uncertainty, conflict, negative energy, generally speaking. So it's almost like his classmates. He lives in a city of monsters. He lives in the city of demons. And what's going on is he's getting presented with the offer to sacrifice. He's saying you can either sacrifice yourself, literally. It's like, I guess you could say, the suicide. You could sacrifice yourself and go and confront these monsters and get eaten by them, and assert who you are, and possibly, like a hero, win, defeat them, and become the great hero. And that is the achievement of personality. At the end of it, it's like, oh, cool, this dude is this dude. Or else you can sacrifice your voice, which is that symbol of cutting your throat, and you can lose to them, and you can lose your ability to voice yourself, and then you can just fade out of existence and have that great anxiety of like, all right, it was meaningless, it was nothing, and be trapped and fall lower down as opposed to rising up. And so I found that dream fascinating because it gives us some very big themes. You've got that archetype of the emotional terror. You've got the archetype, of course, the city. As I was saying before in the last lecture, there is always a city that you're participating in. And that's a very, very profound archetype. And the one of the best ones in it, though, was that idea of the voice, the logos, identity, and that idea of asserting that. And this is what will lead us, I believe, into the Messiah question, because what I see and what I think Jung is asserting is that Christianity somehow deified that voice creating, personality creating, logos energy within us that speaks to the monsters that would eat him. You know, like what was Jesus? What was Jesus? Only that Dionysian symbol. Dionysus is again that Messiah symbol who speaks his truth to the monsters, and the monsters turn on him and eat him apart and rip him apart. That's what happens in the Dionysus story. He's so beautiful and wonderful and crazy and real that he's get eaten alive by Maenads. And Jesus, what's the same thing? He goes out and he says, "I'm the truth, I'm the light, I'm the way, I'm the Messiah." And what do? The Romans and the Jews, the Romans and the Pharisees gang up together and kill him. And so it's like we destroy beauty and logos and truth. And for you to be beauty, logos, and truth, you've got to risk getting destroyed. And I found that fascinating, seeing that show up in the dream of some dude in high school who was just going about his fucking life. Jimmy Boyle, any thought?
I agree. It's a very good dream. Well, probably not a very good dream for Mr. McDonald, who actually had it. That sounds terrifying. Be chased by monsters and going to slit my damn throat. A little fun exercise, I guess, because dream reading sounds like one of those things which is really woo-woo and weird. And it's like, yeah, I'll read my dreams and it will tell me to something. But then there's loads of interpretations you could throw on it and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, possibly, if you have one dream. Hopefully my dog doesn't start barking. It's the first time he's been allowed in here while I'm doing a stream because I'm home alone. I can be trusted to be home alone by my fiance. So Hopefully he'll be a good boy. If you collect up multiple dreams, this is something I've done. Maybe I'll show it one day, but I've got this really nice picture where I put like a picture of me in the middle. And then what the different dreams will tell you if you collect up a whole bunch of them is like where you're going, what's going to stop you getting there, what will enhance you getting there, and the hell that you envision for yourself, or the hell that your unconscious envisions for you. So Mr. McDonald, anyone else who's watching this, if you take that dream and you analyze it properly, because there are multiple things it might mean, right? Then you collect up another dream, then another, then another, then another.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll experience a few monsters. And maybe you could put those monsters together to make Mr. Meta Monster. And the Meta Monster has the same traits across all three of them. And you're like, okay, this is definitely something real. It gives you more confidence that what you're reading into your dreams is actually true. Because otherwise you read one dream and you're like, well, it's one dream. Who cares, right? I've had them for my whole life. If you collect loads and then if you assemble them, I don't know how artistic you might be. I'm autistic rather than artistic. I cannot do anything. So I have to do it on the computer with like little things that assemble out like, I think you called it when you did it, Stefan. It was like, or Stephen, sorry. It was a novel that you created, wasn't it?
Yes.
But like an actual story. That sounds really psychedelic. But you can create like a piece of artwork of like you. Imagine that there's the self in Jungian psychology is you across time. That's what your dreams will eventually tell you. You put them on the page, and it's like, that's where I'm going. These will help me. This will stop me. That's my hell. And that's an unbelievably fun exercise to do. And you know it's correct. Probably, but you know it's correct when you viscerally feel that it's right.
Yeah.
You're like, yes, I feel alive. I feel my dreams are speaking to me. It's coming to me from the other side. It's beautiful. Absolutely great fun.
That's absolutely true. There is something unquestionably real about it when you do it. It's very hard to communicate it until you do it, because when you sit down with something that came out of your own head that has this strange mystique about it, like dreams are charged to you with a very profound energy. Like what we just described to McDonald there, he would feel that on a level that we would never feel. Like we can only sort of say, oh, I see these patterns here, and the patterns might not even be right. But he could, like if they click, if we say a pattern and it clicks with him, he would get this emotion in it because it's charged with his emotions. It's the most unified version of thought. It's visual, it's also intellectual, and it's emotional, and it packs them all together and presents it to you in a story. And so when you break it apart, it's charged. And then when you're able to crack the nut in a dream and reveal its meaning, there's this really strange phenomenon where you get this burst of imagination. It's almost like someone sets your mind on fire. It's like you're on a drug of sorts, and then suddenly your mind is full of color. Like I used to get this all the time. It's like it's a really subtle high in a way. You know, it's like you're popping into the dream world all of a sudden, and suddenly your imagination's like flying, whizzing away. You're seeing all this stuff very clearly, and it just fills you with meaning, and it's like the mind of a child. It's that type of energy. And as James was saying, the correct way to do it is do it over a long period of time, abstract out thematic characters, and they become essentially the gods of your life. If you think about how a mythology would have started, it would have been someone comes up with a funny story like a comedian, and then like 300,000 other people do that, and then they collect the best versions of those stories and they put them all together, and then suddenly people will be like, oh, this guy warrior boyo, and this guy, you know, mean boyo, and this guy savage boyo, and this guy fighting boyo. They're all sort of like similar, and then they merge them all together into one boyo, which would be like warrior fighting savage boyo, and they just call him Aries. And they like make these abstractions go higher, and it would happen over a long period of time. And this is how you get eventually a pantheon of gods like they had in Greek myth, and eventually an entire theology like they had in Greece, and then eventually in Christianity and whatnot. So and Hinduism is a perfect example of this. It's a super complicated, very, very dreamlike mythology in that type of way. And if you can do that with your dreams and pull out ideas and develop a pantheon of sorts of your life in some way. And it's so interesting when you do it. As I said, I did it. I pulled it out. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. I was just following Jung's advice. And I eventually got a novel out of it. I'm actually scripting out one of the episodes. I'm going to release it up in this channel. So watch for that, people. But nonetheless, I did that, and I abstracted out a lot of it, and I've got a story now that I really, really want to get to the public, and I really want to see what people make of it. But also I abstracted out philosophical ideas, because there's just so much there. There's music in it, there's a story in it, and then there's concepts in it that are fucking huge. Like the one I was talking about, the kingdom, that's where it all came together for me, is that I would notice that I was in different towns in dreams, but suddenly when I put them all together, I realized that they all represent one place. and then there was this concept of a god above this place, and that was all came from studying these things in that type of way. And it's a way of thinking that I wouldn't have been able to get there on my own. I had to go this weird alternate route, and it actually proved to be real in some sense. Like I believe you could fail test that kingdom idea by simply looking around at if people need to position, they need to put an idea in that slot, which is the kingdom archetype. Like they need to put a messiah on the throne. They need to put a kingdom in the kind of hole where it's like, what do I worship? And that, I think that's like, I don't know, I haven't done any studies on it, but I think that's infallible. Like you look at the way humans organize themselves, they all need that. And that all came from dream consciousness, which is fucking wild. So yes.
Yes, it's incredibly wild. What's the phrase? I think it's a quote from Joseph Campbell. Might be wrong. That a dream is a personal mythology, and then like the mythology is the collective dream, or something like that. So maybe these religions, and it seems very probable, at least in part, came about through a collective dream process, because we weren't always conscious creatures. You know, this is something that really amused me. I saw a tweet by I quite like to look up whenever people criticize Carl Jung and then laugh at them, because they don't really know what the hell they're talking about. Because I haven't actually found a good critique of Carl Jung yet. Like his actual
Michael
ideas.
Jones, man. Michael Jones gives a good critique, but I don't think it's right. But
well, his actual work, from my understanding, E. Michael Jones's critique is more based on the financial side of things rather than the actual ideas specifically. But Richard Dawkins was attacking Carl Jung's ideas, and I completely forgot what the hell I was going to say, because you mentioned E. Michael Jones, and then when you mentioned E. Michael Jones, other things come to my goddamn mind. For God's sake.
You were saying you like to look up people who critique Carl Jung and laugh at them.
Yes, it'll probably come back to me later because it's completely gone. It's completely gone. God damn it. Also, by the way, make sure the screen is swapping over to me. I'm not sure if it is. I saw in the chat some bloke saying I can't see James's incredibly handsome face. Because obviously you want to look at me rather than you over the course of this stream.
I was getting a little bit focused on me there, James. Sorry. I was like, these people, they need to see a bit more of Stefan, do you know?
That's very rude. You mean more of Stephen? Stevie boy.
All right, James, look. All right, James. I gave you 3 chances for teasing me and bullying me here in public. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going to go and we're going to screen share, and we're going to look up 10 of the most embarrassing British military blunders. So here, we'll start with number 5. And if you're mean to me again, we'll do number 4. So here's number 5. Ishwalanga, 1879. When the governor of British-controlled Southern Africa decided he wanted to anglicize some more Africa, specifically lands beyond the Zulu kingdom. So this is like these savages, you know, British coming down being like, we'll try to take over all these Zulus. And they're like, oh, sure, they're only Zulus. Like, they're only fools. Because this is how the British think about people, don't they, James? This is how they think about their colonies, isn't it, James?
That's terrifying. Shut up, Doc. Jesus Lord.
And look, they went to try fight them. 20,000 of them, the Zulus showed up, and they got destroyed, man. They just got absolutely destroyed by a load of Zulus who they had no respect for. So ha.
Right. So what I want you to do is to Google Irish military successes, and then what you'll see is there will be 0 Google results.
Let's see what we get. Irish military successes. Military history of Ireland.
Yep, none there.
Oh, the Norman era.
Yeah, I'm expecting just to say this page does not exist.
Okay, this is actually so embarrassing. All right, so Irish military history. It's like early history, Norman era, the Kingdom of Ireland, and then it goes to the number 4, Irishmen in the British Army. Oh, that is so bad. So okay, we're gonna read number 4 because you're being a dick. What was this one? The British lost somewhere else. It's all. Look at this. Singapore, 1942. They got ruined. Dnieper raid. It's so embarrassing. Who would ever
such a jealous boy?
Who would ever want to be a British person?
It's almost cute how much of a complex you have. It's really cute. It's everyone who's watching. I get really angry texts in the middle of the night from Stephen. He's drunk and he keeps doing weird voodoo magic on camera with pictures of me. And he's like, "Why can't I be English? Why?" And he keeps stabbing it over and over again. It's really embarrassing. If everyone creates a GoFundMe to help Stephen with his mental health, we would really appreciate that, because we love you and care about you. But you need to let your anger out in a productive way.
Please, James, please. I'll find something else. Next time I'll get you. Don't worry. All right, let's actually get into the book that we're here for, because the people are pretty sick of us now at this stage. I'd say they're just like, who the fuck are these guys posing as boyos, imposter boyos, saying that they know all about Carl Jung? Well, guess what? We have some thoughts on Carl Jung, and we're about to deliver them to you in a fresh packet of astral knowledge. Jimmy Boyo, shall we? We're picking up on Saint Augustine. I have a premise that I want to set up, and I'm sure you love when I just talk for a long time. So would you like? So would you like me to talk for a long time while you look up handsome Irishmen or something like that on your little gay phone there?
I will let you speak. You're not going to speak because you want to. I will let you speak. Yes.
Yeah. So we are getting into the archetype of the Messiah. Hello, people. This is where we truly get into it. And I was studying this for a little bit, just to get my head clear. I was reading about Augustine. This is what Jung starts talking about now. It's quite a complicated idea, because we're after setting up this premise that the Messiah is going to get challenged by the Antichrist. We've got the seat of the self, the throne of the self. As we said, it's the archetype of the self, and whoever sits in that self is how we identify ourselves. And the way I describe this is when we are at the bottom and we're suffering, and we ask ourselves, how do we fight our way out? What's the thing that will give me hope and meaning? What's the right way forward? What's the thing that saves me? And we look in deep inside our souls when we're suffering that immense pain. And what we'll do is we'll look at whoever is in that seat of ourselves. So the Romans would have looked and saw Julius Caesar, or maybe one of their gods, or the Greeks would have seen Achilles or some type of character like that and be like, this is who I am. I am a strong, juicy boyo, and I don't suffer. I will fight my way through it. And so we have Jesus sitting there, but it seems like there's an attempt at a usurpation of like generally the astral energy, the meme energy, the collective mind of the people are trying to jostle Christ out of that place and say, Christ is no man to look up to anymore. We need to get rid of that guy, because he's just like, as Nietzsche said, he's just a cook on a stick. And it's Nietzsche then asserts that what we need to
is
jostle...
that what Nietzsche just said? Christ was a cock on a stick.
it was one of his Twitter drops. He was just like, yes, I need to figure out a Nietzsche accent, man, because he's German, isn't he? Yeah, but nonetheless, like Nietzsche was giving out about him, saying, like the Antichrist. Nietzsche was saying that we need to jostle Christ out of that position in our minds in order to put in a more healthy and strong Achilles-like character, which he fronted as the Übermensch, who I guess we could talk about at a later stage. But we have this question of what is the function of that image? Is that image something that you can just pop anything into there? Or does it have to be a specific realistic image, a realistic ideal, an idea that is connected with something, a part of us? Does it have to be almost like a personification of a philosophical idea? And so as I was reading through this Augustine boyo, I'm thinking, like, what were these Catholic saints? These are the spine of the Western canon. And it's easy to throw them out. We tend to throw these guys out because we say to them, oh, they were just Catholics. So they couldn't have thought well at all, because all they were doing there is just like wanking on about God and all that shit. But these guys were definitely doing something legit. They were codifying the premises that we needed in order to build the scientific revolution. So they were distilling out a mindset that helped us move forward as a species in the most profound way of all. Like this is the great European civilization. And it seems like Augustine was telling us that we have a nature. And so our nature is the thing that we need to connect to if we want to save ourselves if we want to get in touch with the best part of ourselves and save ourselves from suffering. And the way he defines this as sort of like Descartes and saying that there's animals and then there's us, and what is different between us and animals. Animals are driven by their emotions, their instincts, and they're sort of like Englishmen. They have no higher forms of consciousness.
Oh, that was very funny. I heard one laugh way over there. Like, carry on. Very good.
You kind of destroyed me there, I gotta be honest. Fuck.
On top forward today. You got to watch out.
So we have that sub-rational consciousness, and we have that, so we have that animal consciousness and the higher consciousness, which is the rational consciousness, which is what Augustine connects this to. So you hear a lot of people say this nowadays. It's like, why do we eat animals? It's because we're superior to animals. Why? Because we have the divine spark. What is the divine spark? It's our ability to think. And what is our ability to think? And it's like, oh, fuck. And it eventually revolves around to this idea of logos. And this becomes a question of what are we? So if we're talking about the seed of ourselves, our true nature, then the question is, who are we? If we were to look in our souls and say, what makes me human? What makes me the person? What makes me true? What makes me powerful? What makes me in the image of God, as they say? And that would be the idea that I have a ability to create. I have the ability to speak the truth. I have the ability to act as a moral actor. These are all things the animals seem to lack to some extent, and to a large extent. And so this is a good enough place to define ourselves. This is a good enough place to say, okay, this is what's special about us, and this is what we should worship. This part of us is what is most valuable and most treasurable. And so they're now moving this up the hierarchy of values. Sitting it at the top of the pyramid is the thing we all bow down to. Sitting it as on the throne and saying, this divine spark is what makes us special. And they're taking out a value and distilling it out there. And this revolves around generally the idea of logos. It becomes a virtue. It's not necessarily reason as we've turned it into nowadays, which is a bit delusional. We're saying, oh yes, it's just your ability to scientifically think rationally. Logos is more about your ability to be principled. Now, that's a big difference, because you can be a very low IQ person, but you can be really principled. And that means you're a virtuous person, whereas you can be super high IQ, but you could be a degenerate hedonist and take the world in a very negative place. Just because you're high IQ and can invent nukes doesn't mean you can use them in a way that's productive. And so there is that conception that they started to distill out, saying that there was this idea of logos is what's special about us. And this is what we must deify. And they were all rationalizing this after the fact. But what Jesus seemed to represent to us was the personification of logos. So if we want to take out all the theological arguments and talk about this from a based psychological perspective and say, why was Jesus such a big deal? A lot of people be like, oh yeah, well, he wasn't a god. And okay, that's whatever, that's a big question. But if you want to just even do it on a culturally Christian perspective, Jesus was the most effective symbol of logos that came in history at that point. And he is a good enough person to build a society on, because he acted out logos so well. So this is why we worship him, is because he just said, all right, I'll be pure logos. And that means that I won't in any way violate any of my principles. I just made a video saying Jesus was a Chad alpha male. And this is what it is. It's like that scene with Leonidas where the Xerxes comes and he's like, I will kill you. You're only 300. And he's like, yeah, kill me. I'm going to fight to the end. There's nothing you can do to make me obey you. I will not take a knee. You will have to destroy me. And I don't even care if you destroy me. I've made peace with that, because I know the principles matter more than, the hedonism that you can give me. And it's that type of idea that's codified in Jesus. It's like he did that. He achieved that. He was that logos. And so we saw this and we're like, wow, that's awesome. And then the tragedy is that, like, when that came, what we did is we murdered it. We're like, oh, it's too perfect. Kill it quick. So that's the idea of us killing the God. But then that's good enough to build the premise of a civilization upon. And this is why it works as a functional religion so well, is because if you keep telling people Jesus will save you, it sort of does mean that when you're down and out and you're going to make the bad choice, the long-term choice, and you're going to say, right, I'm going to rob, I'm going to steal, I'm going to do something anti-logos, I'm going to break my principles in order to survive. What will happen is you will get this image in your head of, how did Jesus do things? Well, Jesus didn't break his principles in order to survive. When the Pharisees said, are you a god? He didn't say, oh, Jesus, no, definitely not. Jeez, I never said nothing like that. You fucking mad? Like, I'm just out here having a few pints. Like, your boys are just talking shite about me. Like, no, you're the class ones here, not me. I'm not class at all. No, instead he was like, yeah, I'm the son of man. They're like, what? Like, I think the actual scene is they go like, are you the son of man, or are you the Messiah, or something like that? And Jesus says, yeah, dudes, yeah, I'm legitimately the dude that you're all talking about in that book. And then the Pharisee is just like, blasphemy, and he just rips his clothes off, which I've always found very strange. It's like, what? Just goes in this orgy of clothes ripping, but nonetheless, that's how pissed off they were. It's like, you can't just say that shit. And so it's standing on those principles. It's standing on those principles. So I think this is the most perfectly codified in the idea of what would Jesus do? You know that common phrase where people are like, you're stuck, and you're like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And then this is where these images of the self come in. They're heroes, they're redeemers, they're saviors, they're messiahs in this reason. Because in the back of your mind, you call, you're stuck, you're in this chaos, and then you call to yourself. It's like, what do I do? And out of nowhere, this image comes, like a dream. Like what we're just describing, when you're in this stuck place, you're like, what do I do in my high school? These people are being weird. A dream comes to you and gives you the answer in a really weird, counterintuitive way. And so you ask, what do I do? What do I do? And then you get this image of Jesus just like marching up there, carrying that cross. And then that's how it functions as a savior. It literally comes out of your unconscious and shows you the path because it's so universally applicable. And it's almost like coming in to pick you up and take you out. So it's like Jesus literally comes to you psychologically. He comes to you and says, oh, fuck, you're in a bad spot. Well, this is what you should do. Be like me. Jesus, through me, you will find the way. This is what they're saying with all this stuff. It's totally based and logical. It's completely grounded in psychological fact. It's a great way to build the premise of a culture on. And that was proven on the construction of Christianity. And it's a very smart way to conduct yourself. Like, I know a lot of people get a bit caught up and they're like, oh, Jesus, it's all woo-woo shit. It's all like, oh, like you go into a church and there is something a bit off-putting about Christian masses and people who are very devout Christians, because they almost seem brainwashed, where they're being like, Jesus loves, Jesus this, Jesus that, Jesus this. And it does turn you off a bit, because the words, the symbols feel hollow in some sense. But when you dig into them and look at the functional side of the psychology, it's super, super, super realistic what happens. You are stuck there, you're in pain, or you're offered, the deal you cannot refuse, millions of dollars to start a war in the Middle East or something like that. And this symbol flows up. And you say, what should I do? What should I do? And it's like, Jesus is right there. And so the question is, I guess this is the Antichrist question, is people are trying to jostle and put another figure in there. And Nietzsche, I think, in kudos to him, was trying to suggest we put a strong figure in there. Like what's terrible. Like, I prefer Nietzsche's suggestion than what's happened now, because Nietzsche was suggesting at least something valuable and strong that was promoting health. But now we've just sort of put in, as Nietzsche said, the last man. That's the bugman, the sort of like the true man, the true hero of our age is this sort of totally equalized, no personality, no hard stances, no opinion, no masculine energy, no defining features at all. It's just this sort of weird, skinny cheese string person of some sorts. Like, I actually need to work on conceptualizing this, because this could be an unconscious thing, is what's become the standard messiah of this age. Like, who do I act like? It's that very basic question. Who do I act like? What do I do? And if your culture does not give you Christ, and your culture fails to give you a replacement like an Ubermensch, and it doesn't give you a Greek, because a lot of people are going back to Greek mythology now, it doesn't give you a Greek like Hercules, what the fuck are you going to do? You're just going to become this sort of unconscious thing that's getting promoted to us now, which is the beta male taking over, I guess. That could be it. James, I spoke a lot there, and I see there's tears in your eyes, and like, that's okay. But tell me what you think about all this, sir. Like, any thoughts?
Yes, I like what you said. Actually, it's very good. I've been a bit distracted by my dog who wants to destroy everything in my room, but I'm gonna get back onto focus. So it seems to me that there are multiple ways of looking at this. One is the metaphysical reality. Was Jesus Christ the Son of God? And if we follow him, will we go to heaven? And it's like we can't talk about that because Jung didn't really talk about that. In fact, if you Google this stuff, what did Jung think about the resurrection, for example? He doesn't answer it, which is really annoying. So we can't touch on that. But it does seem to be that the idea of the kingdom exists, and the idea of the hierarchy exists, the idea of the king exists, the idea of the god exists. These are like psychological constants across every single human being. Wherever we came from, however we evolved, these are constants that exist within our minds. So as a human being, you know from the structure of the psyche that you're but a wee little ego, right? And you're going around living your ego little life. And you have to bend the knee to something. And you bend the knee to something all the time, whether that be in real life, in terms of the real kingdom around you, the laws, that's one thing. But we've talked about this will of God idea. You bend the knee to something else. So a good example of that would be a principle. Because when it comes to a principle, that's imposed on you from some higher faculty within you, and you bend the knee to it. That's a weird idea. So the question then becomes, what should you bend the knee to? Or what should everybody bend the knee to? And it seems to be that Christian unconsciousness produced the idea of the logos. That's what we should bend the knee to. It's like, okay, well, why the hell the logos? Is that an arbitrary thing? It's like, no. One, everybody has the logos. Like if you want to, some people, I guess more scientific types, they would rather have IQ there. They're like, well, we need to have high IQ people leading us. It's like, well, not everybody has high IQ. Logos actually seems to, this fascinating thing about it. Everybody has the capacity for it, and it works for what we want to do. So the idea of being able to create principles and hold them, that's what we should be aiming for. So that there's a line in the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus is being so base. If you read the Sermon on the Mount, like properly, slowly, not the way you're taught it in Catholic school, which is like, isn't this lovely? Blessed are the peacemakers. It's like, no, that's not what he's saying at all. It's really not what he's saying at all. What Jesus says is, if you follow what I say, so first of all, he says, if you just say that you believe in me, I don't care about you. Goodbye. You're a loser. And they're like, but Lord, I said I believe in you. He's like, go away. I don't care what comes out of your mouth. Like, just do as I do. And if you do, then your house will be held up on the rocks so that when the rain comes down, your house will stay. But if you don't follow me, and if you replace Christ with logos, then this works just as well. If you don't follow the logos, then when the rain comes, and the rain always comes, always, from inside your head, outside your head, then bye-bye house, all the things you've worked for going down the hill far away. So it seems to be that the Christian consciousness put logos on top to make sure that everything remained stable, order over a long period of time so that things can work. You can glue yourself together in the face of never-ending entropy. And what we're doing now, clearly, once you remove the Christ image, and it correlates perfectly with this across time, is when you remove the logos, things start going downhill. You have wars constantly all over the planet. I think more people died in the 20th century than like all the rest of history combined, more or less, because there are more people alive today than actually existed. You know, it's like look at the way our social values are being held together. They're disappearing because no one has principles anymore. You go and it's really difficult to go and talk to somebody and say, I believe in this, because they'll always come back and say to you, like, that's just arbitrary. That's your truth. I'm going to live my truth. It's like, no. Like, you need to have some kind of principle holding you down. And if you don't, well, we're soon going to find out what that's going to do to us. Maybe this is all just complicated laughing, trying to make up for religion post hoc. I don't know, man. I don't think so.
Very, very good. Very good. I want to give people some pictures. I was talking about various images of the self, and I was just collecting them as James was putting out that very important fact that we need to come to terms with, is that we do need to honor what we call logos a lot more than we currently are. Here's us diagnosing the problems of society, as we're always warned against doing as young boyos. But nonetheless, I think it is a based assertion that we must stick by our principles. And what's great about Jesus is that he says, you know, if two boyos on the internet tell you to stick by your principles, that's not like in any way them being good boyos. Good boyos would stick by their principles in action, in the private, you know, the quietness of their lives. Like, they wouldn't nut all over their curtains. Like, that's where the war is won, is in this. It's in the small details, and then the big details also matter too. But it's lost and won in the small details just as importantly. That's why God is always watching. It's why it's such a good practical image to think that God's always watching you, because then your moral unconditionally, you know. Like it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I'm a like walk out in the street and be like, I'm a good boyo, but then you go home and then you're just like literally like painting your room with nuts or something like that. And so it's
Jesus
it's
Lord.
about getting back in touch with that idea of logos and principle, and understanding that it is intelligence and truth, but it's also not intelligence and truth. It's more than that. It's a super complicated idea, and this is why these symbols that come out of our dreams are so damn powerful. So damn powerful because they symbolize. They capture all those meanings wrapped together in one. It's too hard for us to philosophically break all this stuff down. It's way easier to just give someone an idea. And so this is why Jesus functioned so well for the Europeans, because he gave them that idea in unison. He was like, oh, this is a man who did it all, or at the very least did most of it, did it all to a highest degree possible. And we haven't found a good replacement since. There's been plenty of people who've represented logos. You know, there's been plenty of great people, but like Jesus just fits really, really well, you know. And it's a big question to ask. Why do we need to change that? There is this assertion that we need to change that. Nietzsche is the only person I've seen put forward a decent argument why we might need to change that. Other than that, I've never seen anybody do a good job. Like Richard Dawkins, utter failure. Those guys don't do a good job of explaining why we need to change our conception of ourselves. Like that's not... No one's done a good job, so it's something that we need to watch for. And because no one done a good job, what we've gotten in return is a new self, and we're moving towards this image more and more today. And it is this idea of almost I guess the best way to describe it is gender fluid, equalized. So it's an equalizing thing. There's no strict gender. There's no strict stances. Everything is open. It's hyper, like it's this weird energy, and it's related to this idea of hedonism. Like I hear people talk, and I was listening to some podcast there the other day, and it was some guy who's like super Catholic, for example, and he was talking with someone who's super left. And the guy on the left was asked, if this Catholic guy got into power and imposed like a fascist Catholic theocracy, which was like, you know, like a Catholic state, and you must be Catholic, like a Muslim caliphate, you know, would you fight in order to, would you stand up and rebel against this authoritarian regime? And the liberal, the left dude, he said, no, I probably wouldn't, because my life is more valuable than that. And so I would probably just obey. And that astounded me, because it showed me that man who was fighting against this Catholic guy on his ideas, when it came to actually saying, would you take action on that? Would you stand by your principles? He said, I will not, because my life matters more. I matter more. And so you're getting this new man that is unprincipled. It's getting, and it's like not this particular person, whoever this is. I'm sorry for using you as this example.
I've also got to say that the name of the image I can see in your tab is beta.jpg. That made me chuckle quite a bit.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like it's unconsciously we're moving towards an archetype closer to this, as opposed to Jesus. And the soul of this energy is that thing of not standing for principles, total hedonism, total sacrifice the world for myself, sacrifice principles for myself. It's essentially sacrifice logos for my eros, sacrifice logos for my feelings. And so the more we move in that direction, the more people are going to start to form into this type of character, this gender neutral, opinion neutral, you know, everything neutral person. And it's becoming very, very weird. There's something strange about it. Look at this here, the triumph of the beta male. And you have like 4 dudes all putting their hands in each other's pockets. But it is a movement towards that, as I said, because we haven't defined a new image of the self. And Jung was asserting that we just can't straightforward do it. We can't just pop in a new image of the self that easy. And here's a few examples of, like, you know, the classic alpha male characters. These are becoming rarer nowadays, but this is like the symbol of the 50s. This is the, you know, the man who's got everything under control, smoking a cigar, dressed well, looking good. And this is, you see this now, there's a big movement, the men's rights movement, or the manosphere. This is, they're all gathering around a meme, and this is the meme of this man. You know, what Christians do is they gather around the meme of Jesus and say, this man is what we build societies on. They were successful. They proved they won the test of time. Now men are starting to gather around this. We've never gathered around that other thing, the beta male thing before. We've never done that. We don't really know what happens. Maybe we have done it and it's failed in the past. And that's a big, really important thing to understand. But now we're gathering around this self. And then when you strip us of those old selves, we start to gather around our more basic instincts. Like, it's like, oh, this dude, you know, just a very low resolution winner, like Tyler Durden type character. Tyler Durden's even more sophisticated. This is just a guy who's like, has money and looks good. it's like, all right, sweet. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's lower resolution. You know what I mean? And then when you put these things to more high resolution, you realize having money and looking good ain't as valuable as, say, having logos. Having logos is what gets everybody to have money and look good, and then you more money to look good. So it's this type of direction our thinking goes. And then these are just, I just thought these were brilliant. This is a kangaroo that is fucking jacked as shit. And there's another kangaroo.
Can I just say why?
I think I was looking for alpha males and this came up and I was like, this is what we're going to do here. We're going to check this out. Wait there. I think the last one. Oh no, it's just Jesus. There's the one that sat in our soul for a long time, and I'm not even sure we're past it yet. But this is the big boyo. This was this image of this man who is the savior. This is what we'd look to when we say, what should we be more like? And it was this dude. It's an astounding idea. For 2,000 years, we're like, this is the hero that saves us. This is our culture hero. And I think this is what Jung is getting at, is that was there. He sat on the throne. He was a big fucking deal. And you think that you can just throw that away because you're so fucking woke, don't you? Because you're on the internet and you got your spliffs and you think you've got it all figured out. But wait till this boy shows up and fucking gets you and says, yeah, you think you can just be a soft, gender neutral, opinion neutral boyo. And then he establishes the kangaroo caliphate. What the fuck are you going to do then? What are you going to do when the kangaroo caliphate comes and he says, yeah, submit to me? Look at his red neck. It's probably from choking himself just to keep himself tough. Fucking badass.
What? Like. On right now. So instead of Christ and Antichrist, you've got Christ versus the jacked kangaroo caliphate.
The kangaroo caliphate. That's gas. Because there's this term called kangaroo court. Did you ever hear that before?
Yes. Kangaroo court.
So it's almost like a kangaroo is like this parody caliphate, the kangaroo caliphate. So it's like if we keep going down the sodomy Babylon caliphate, Babylon empire that we're building, then the kangaroo caliphate will show up, and it's all in counter to the Christian theologian empire, Christendom that was there before. It's an interesting dynamic.
Let's talk about Saint Augustine, or Saint Augustine. Some of you Yanks call him. His name was actually Augustine of Hippo. Maybe the hippos can fit into this some way as well. Maybe it's supposed to be the hippos versus the kangaroos, and that's the whole message all along. That's really what Christ came to warn us about. We've got to make some strange decision. I have no idea what's going on right now. I have no idea. I don't know what Carl Jung's trying to tell us at all. No idea.
Yes. Interesting. Jimmy Boyo. So any thoughts on all that? I was on a bit of a tirade, but any spins? Or should we just power on? It's up to you, dude.
Spins, as you put it in your Irish voice. But I think we could crack on so that the spins can sit into context.
All right, crack on there, boy.
No, yes, I do indeed. No, yes. All right, so we're on page 38, people, paragraph 71. I hope you are sitting comfortably. Yeah. Saint Augustine, 354 to 430. He's a very old boy. He died a very long time ago. Distinguishes between the God image, which is Christ, and the image which is implanted in man as a means or possibility of becoming like God. The God image is not in the corporeal man, but in the anima rationalis, the possession of which distinguishes man from animals. The God image is within, not in the body, where the understanding is, where the mind is, where the power of investigating truth is. There God has his image, and my dog agrees with that quite a lot. Therefore, we should remind ourselves, says Augustine, that we are fashioned after the image of God, nowhere save in the understanding. But where man knows himself to be made after the image of God, there he knows there is something more in him that is given to the beasts. From this, it is clear that the God image is, so to speak, identical with the anima rationalis. The latter is the higher spiritual man, the homo coelestis of St. Paul. Dog, shut up, Jesus Lord. Adam before the fall. Christ is an embodiment of the God image, whose totality is specially emphasized by St. Augustine. The Word, he says, took on complete manhood, as it were in its fullness, the soul and body of a man. And if you would have me put it more exactly, since even a beast of the field has a soul and a body, when I say a human soul and human flesh, I mean he took upon him a complete human soul. There's lots of stuff in there about souls and bodies and real images and not images. Maybe you should break it down for people. Make it
well.
Make it
that was the premonition. The setup I put up there before was my best attempt to break down what I think he's trying to say, is that there is something in us that is separate from animals, in that we can identify with something that is abstract, like logos. When he says, for example, Christ is an embodiment of the God image, whose totality is specially emphasized by Saint Augustine. The word, he says, the word translates in the Bible actually as logos, usually. So that's important, because the word is a dry, empty word compared to the word logos, which is a vivid and powerful concept, massive principle. So I would say what he's trying to get at is that notion that we have a separate part of ourselves that seems to be more profound than animals, in that we can behave principally. We can do principled behavior. That's what he's getting at there. And yeah, I think I'd set it up in that way. I think I'd explained it before. Any thoughts though yourself, sir?
Yes, I do. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm trying to keep this dog under control, Stephen, but he won't be under control. He wants a hug now.
Oh, yeah. Show the dog. Give us a look at the dog.
He is, yeah. Here's the absolute pain in the ass. I want to actually talk about St. Augustine for a minute, because you might think to yourself, maybe after this, why the hell is Jung talking about St. Augustine? He's like a random dude. Why not another saint? It's like, who's to say that St. Augustine is right? That's actually a good question. So what seems to happen with religious thought, because it comes out of the unconscious, is it's not just Christ come down and gives his message, because Christ didn't write a single word. We don't even know if Christ could write, to be honest. So the first account of the Gospels was like 40 years after Christ died, 30, 40, I think it was like 60 AD, something like that. So it seems like there was a lot of psychic energy that surrounded a lot of the early church fathers and stuff like that. And you have a few characters who seem to really be in tune with it. And a lot of the early saints were quite scholarly types who really understood this. Do not move. Do not move. And so, for example, you have St. Augustine, who was about 400 years after Christ. Jesus Lord. And then you have other characters like St. Thomas Aquinas, who was able to tap into things too. And so he was one of those characters who seems to be very much in tune with what was going on in Christian times. So just brief bit about St. Augustine there. So yeah, this idea about the God image, just briefly. It's like, so you're made in the image of God, but Christ is the actual God image. So what does that mean? What he's doing is he's equating the godly part of you, the part of you that's not just fallen and human and broken and wrong and mistaken all the time. There is a part of you that is godlike, that has capacity to become like gods. And I think this is where some of the Mormon philosophy comes from. And what that seems to be, he describes it as the anima rationalis, which is like the rational soul. It's like that's that part of you which is to do with that mind-body dichotomy. And so sort of the mind bit up here is really the part of you that has the potential to become holy. And what sits on the throne is the actual complete God image up there. So we're fallen. Like creation in some sense isn't necessarily complete. We're meant to sort of continue creation in many ways. That was a more Gnostic idea. Are you complaining? Have you had enough? Sweet Lord. You take over for a second, Jesus.
Stop with this tyranny of the dog. Yes, people. Yes. See, as we started to bitch about humans having higher minds than gods, James's dog was like, you know what the fuck? I'm not having none of this shit off some fucking Englishman talking to some genius Irishman. I'm having none of this shit off this. So I think he's kicking up stink. But you do.
Just quickly, I'm going to interrupt you again. So you've got this capacity which is godlike, and what John was the first one to do this. John was an absolute G, by the way. There are lots of texts we think were written by this bloke John. If you're going to follow anyone from around the time of Christ, look up absolute G. And so what he equated God was the word, and this is of course is a terrible translation. The hell does that mean? God was a word. All right, okay. So you can just write a swear word and God is the word. It's like, no, it doesn't make any sense. God is the logos. And if you've got a part of you that's up here, which is godlike, what they're doing implicitly is equating that part of you which is capable of doing the logos with God. And that's what they all sort of caught on to, but didn't necessarily say it like that. What's also interesting is that the logos somehow is transcendent. And I don't quite know what to make about that, because God is a transcendent being and he exists above us, whatever, apparently so. And he is the logos, but that's transcendent. It's like above you, like a star in the sky. So there's a part of you that's transcendent, and if you follow it, it will deliver you from this suffering. And that's part of you that's made of God. Now, there are two possible ways out of this. It's like, it does actually literally come from God, in which case you should follow it. Or, and I don't know how you could possibly argue against this, that it loses some of the weight behind it. It takes the place of what a God should be.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yes,
that's
true.
why you get into that position, because if I don't know if you can actually have a purely psychologized version of religion. It's really difficult. If you were to take all the religious symbolism, say Christ and God and Moses, and be like, well, they never actually really existed. They never really did their thing. But what they were was just pieces of psychology acting out in the world. So would that actually be good enough to continue to sustain the religion? And I don't know. It's like if you're sitting there and you've got we'll say a real craving to go and engage in an addiction, like a cigarette or something, to have an idea of God actually looking at you might just be more powerful. So we're losing the symbolism, and us trying to articulate it might actually still lose that. We can't do it without that conscious feeling factor. But what we do know 100% sure, logos is a transcendent thing within you, which is like a god, because if you follow it, you will bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth by your definition, as long as it's not too corrupt, and everyone else's definition.
Yeah, that was a really good monologue there. Like, especially the part where your dog talked. That was just fucking magnificent. But
all this stuff, I sit and talk to him about it all the time. Talk about singing the Kangaroo Caliphate. Beautiful time.
He looks like he could get jacked. Give him a few rides, man. He looked like a jack kangaroo. He'd be like leading the show over there.
So not for a little while. Jesus.
So what you brought up is like a very interesting point, is that there is a serious cardboardization of religion if you try suck out all the true gravitas to it by saying that no, it's not true, it's just a psychological reality. Nonetheless, some people just can't believe. This is what Nietzsche meant by the problem of God is dead, is that our metaphysical architecture has failed us, or we've lost it, one of those two things. And so we'll find it very hard to believe in these symbols anymore, because we don't believe that there's another world. We don't believe in transcendent gods and all this shit, and afterlives and all that shit. We don't believe in that stuff anymore. And Nietzsche was not asserting whether they are real or not. He's saying we're simply going to stop believing them, although he did say quite clearly that there are no other worlds. But nonetheless, whether they're real or not, we've stopped believing in them. So we're in that existential crisis where it's like, oh, fuck. At the very least, we are culturally Christian, because we know that, as we're describing here, Christianity is psychologically based. And I think Jung got us there. But there's still that problem where it doesn't sustain itself long term, because you need something that's real. You need something that's true. And if you don't have that metaphysical architecture, you find it very, 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 very hard to act with total and utter logos, compared to the person who thinks that God is staring at them every moment of the day. Those people are not going to fap, you know? Like, that's where it becomes real, is that when you actually think that, and you have a metaphysical architecture to believe that, then that's good. And nowadays, I've described this before in this stream, is that I find it very hard to believe that there's a God, because I've attached the idea of believing that there's a God with the idea of ignorance. And that's a conditioning. That's actually something I've been conditioned to do in my society. Now I've consented with that. I've been like, yeah, it is an ignorant idea. And I've put the burden of proof on the idea of God. But that's put me in a terrible position where I don't fully take it serious. I'm still, as much as I pontificate up here and say that I'm all about, being logos and being a true juicy boyo, there is a part of me that is a moral relativist still. There is a part of me that Nietzsche has corrupted, and I still haven't defeated him per se. And that's going to eat away at my soul until the very end. And I'm not sure if I'm supporting that with a little bit of eros, knowing that if I can be morally relative, I can have my cake and eat it to some extent. So there is that problem I know going on in me. And it is centered around that idea of, I don't fully take serious that idea of a metaphysical creator staring at my every moment and actually caring about what I do. And every time I sit down with someone and have the God talk, that's the thing it falls on. That's where the hammer falls. That they say, if I died and I met God, and God was angry at me for breaking his rules, for, smoking that spliff, I would be furious. I'd get angry at him. I'd have a serious word with him. And instantly, it's just like, if you restrict someone, if God's plan was to restrict someone or set laws, something in them gets angry at them, and it's the archetype of Satan, exactly. And that's even to take out the gravity of Satan being evil. It's just like Satan psychologically, you want to suck out the soul of it. Psychologically was the desire for ultimate liberty, Lucifer, enlightenment, ultimate liberty, freedom from all rules, freedom to create your own destiny. And that's what's getting wrapped up in there. So it's an interesting problem. I'll end that with one articulation, which is the possibility that Logos is a representation of consciousness, and consciousness was there before the creation of the material world. So we can say at the start of the Big Bang, what's made the Big Bang happen? And perhaps there was an all-pervading consciousness, like they say in Hinduism and all that shit, and that was God. In the beginning, there was the Logos, as John said, as James was saying, John the G. And so if that's the case, what these guys like Augustine might have been getting into is they might have been sitting there and interpreting that, okay, if we're on a supercomputer and we're currently in the hardware, the electricity that runs that thing, or maybe the person who made the hardware or whatever, is this all-pervading mystical consciousness that can't be materialized. And we get a piece of that. It's a piece of God comes inside of us, and that is why we've got the image of God, and that is Logos that's in us. And it's our job to act that out and forward his creation. It's almost like we're his hands working in this supercomputer, this reality, this Minecraft game, in order to produce produce his kingdom, as they say. And it's our job to do it. We have to go build it, that type of thing. And perhaps if you think of it this way, because the problem with us is data. Like, how would God be able to pay attention to everything going on? But at the same time, like, it's quite easy for the CIA to sit there on the internet and record all of our conversations. Like they have, warehouses full of fucking data in Facebook where they're recording people's WhatsApp messages and all that shit. And that's just a very, very human slapdash example of mass surveillance. And so if there was this all-pervading consciousness outside of the hardware that we're currently existing in, would it be so insane to assume that this thing that is consciousness, that we are just a tiny fragment of, may be recording everything that goes through our consciousness? Like, imagine if consciousness was almost like this screen that we're experiencing here, and all this data is going somewhere. And so maybe all that information that's going through consciousness is getting recorded on a hard drive. And then what the final judgment is when God pulls out the hard drive, the records, and says, right, boyo, let's see what you did on all these days when your curtains got very sticky. And that and it's an interesting idea. It's an interesting metaphysical idea, because you can't scientifically invalidate that. You can only say that's not falsifiable, but you can't say that's bullshit, because we don't know what happened at the start of the Big Bang. That's the big, it's the God of the gaps. Like, they don't know what happened, so they have to say, oh, well, it just came out of nothing. But it's like, it could have come out of something just as easy. It's like, it's either or, man. And if it came out of something, like, that something could be an all-present consciousness that watches what we do. So who knows, mate? Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? Indeed, it's really difficult, because when you really think about it, it's like, no matter how much you can articulate, well, Jesus is this symbolic thing that sits on this symbolic thing. It was funny the way you were describing it. It was almost as if none of that matters. It's like a threshold, and the threshold is literal metaphysical God. Otherwise, I can do whatever the hell I want, right? And it's like, that means you haven't grasped it properly. And that's not a critique of you, Stephen. That's a critique of everybody. We can't be subservient to some kind of rational idea. It doesn't work like that. But how about this idea? So we're very used to having consciousness because we were born with consciousness, and we're just used to it. So our experience, we don't control for it in everything that we do. So what did God do at the very beginning of time? Like, he was just hanging around doing whatever God did. And he was like, okay, I'm going to create heaven and earth. And it was without form and void. And I'm going to continue to develop it in the way that I want to. And it is good because I am God. And I say that it is good. Shut up, Jesus. But so you're actually the same thing, because if you think about your life, you go out into the world, like you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, here's a new day. You're like God for the day because you have a choice. Like, there'll be some things that are unconscious, blah, 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 blah. But overall, you have a choice of what the hell it is you want to do. So you confront the potential of the day. Your day is without form and void. And then you speak to it and you're like, I'm going to go have a healthy breakfast today because I want to become a juicy, strong boyo. And then you cook the healthy breakfast and you say to yourself, that's good. You know, Stephen thinks that's good. And then you go and you do the next thing and you create order out of that potential, and that's good. And the next thing out of potential, that's good. And the only thing that can do it, the only principle, the only abstract idea, human faculty that can confront potential of the day and create nice order out of it that is good, is logos. And that is why logos is God. And that is why the capacity within you to do the logos is God. And that, to me, even if there's no metaphysical God, it's like you can't get around that idea that surely, unless you're a depressed, suicidal nihilist like my dog is right now because he wants to play, then surely you would want to create the day that you think is good. And so you confront it and you speak order into it and you create it. And that's your godlike faculty. And that's why that thing needs to sit on top of the throne.
Excellent, Jamie Boyle. Excellent work. Excellent work.
I always I get really upset when you don't say excellent work. I think, oh, have I done something wrong?
Oh no! Oh, forgive me, sir. Forgive me. Usually, I'm caught up in my thoughts. This particular time, I because of your comment, I started looking up towards the end. English cooks.
Christ.
So I'm going to briefly share the what's
no logos present with you right now.
I'm afraid that was a bit of mental nutting that was going on. I think the all-pervading consciousness would be very unhappy, but I'm pretty sure the crowd of degenerates that we all are really want to see this. So I'm going to show the throne of the English people. Let's check this out. Here's one. I think that's fantastic. Here's another one. Look at that shit. Look at this.
Yeah, very nice. Very good.
I'm sorry, dude. That was like, there was no need for that. Actually, there was. I don't know. You made some comment. I was like, I'm gonna get this motherfucker.
Jealous. So jealous. It's okay. It's okay. Jesus will forgive you. No one else will. But Jesus will.
Here. Oh, look at this. Hey, James. Remember hashtag the COD War. 50 million people versus 350,000. You're dead right, man. England, like, look, people, we gotta put it out here. England and Iceland went to war over fishing territory, and England lost. They lost to Iceland. Iceland have not even 500,000 people. England have the fucking largest army in the world, and they lost because they're cucks. That's why.
I got two words to say. It's very profound words. It was actually written by Christ originally back in the day. He said, remember these two words to all the Irish folks: the famine.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, we took over America from you, man. Never forget that. You sent us all. You starved us. We went over to America and we took that state. You had to try genocide us to get us out of there.
Imagine the English worldview is a windscreen, and a little bug hits the windscreen. That's the Irish. Who you are.
I'm going to move on because James is getting cranky.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you that badly.
I don't really have a good position in this because like we did kind of get a little bit schmacked around. I gotta be honest. Like all I can really say is like we had the IRA and we killed some of your civilians, which is kind of shit. So I'm like, we were the original ISIS. That's all I've got back there. Never
You know what would
forget.
cheer us all up is to read some of the words that Carl Jung wrote down.
Yes.
How about
Let's go through another paragraph and then we'll do questions, people, and then we'll wrap it up and do questions, motherfuckers, because we're getting talk about the Cod War, and I think that's a very important thing to remember. We never forget the Cod War, England's glorious loss, Iceland's glorious victory. Let's focus on the winners here.
actually talks about in chapter 27 of this book. It's very, very. So we're on page 39, paragraph 72. Very good paragraph. I quite enjoy.
Excellent.
The God image in man was not destroyed by the fall, but was only damaged and corrupted, deformed, and can be restored through God's grace. The scope of the integration is suggested by the descent in for us, the descent of Christ, its work of redemption embracing even the dead. The psychological equivalent of this is the integration of the collective unconscious, which forms an essential part of the individuation process. Young boyo St. Augustine says, therefore our end must be our perfection, but our perfection is Christ, since he is the perfect God image. For this reason, he is also called King. His bride, sponsor, is the human soul, which in an inwardly hidden spiritual mystery is joined to the word, that two may be in one flesh, to correspond with the mystic marriage of Christ and the church. Concurrently with the continuous of this hieros gamos in the dogma and rite of the church, the symbolism developed in the course of the Middle Ages into the alchemical conjunction of opposites, or chemical wedding, thus giving rise, on the one hand, to the concept of the lapis philosorium, signifying totality, and on the other hand, to the concept of chemical combination. Very technical, very, very alchemical. I do like a bit of alchemy there. Have you got any thoughts?
Wow. This is when we're gonna start. This is when we're gonna start cracking some fucking legit shit here. I think a lot of the boyos that got onto this, they're sort of like, the Jesus stuff's cool, but let's start talking about the wacky Antichrist stuff and alchemy. And look at people. This is where Jung starts sprinkling in a little bit of alchemy. Back in his day, he was very, very warned against doing this. Like, people like Freud were like, you're not really going to get into alchemy, you fucking woo doctor. And Jung was like, oh no, it's serious shit, boyo. Like, it's fucking class. And Jung was like, nah. Or Freud was like, nah. But what Jung is getting at is, as I said before, there are laws to our psychology. What goes up must come down. If you worship Jesus to an unbelievably large amount like we have done, it will cause this tension, which will require an opposite. It will require a balancing force. We need to have a kingdom sitting on the slot of that archetype, and so whatever kingdom you put there will motivate a large proportion of people to fight against each other. The Icelandic people felt that their kingdom was a certain chunk of ocean containing a certain amount of cod, and the English decided to step on that kingdom. So the Icelandic people, motivated and juicy, fought them and beat them. And these are all psychological laws like human motivation, if you will. And one of the common psychological laws is the unification of opposites. It is that sense that you will get ideas and they will distill into each other and formulate and morph and turn into these new things. And so there's logical consequences to this, only that you have to read them through. It's like symbiology. You can only read the progression of these things through the chain of symbols that they form. And so alchemy is, and when Jung was studying alchemy, he was essentially he was doing dream reading. Like when we do dream reading, we're essentially doing what we're talking about here. You look into the dream and you see that, okay, you've got the demons. This guy's also having a few problems with his social circle, and you've got the kingdom, and that also could relate, could relate metaphorically to his high school, his society, and all that stuff. And you're putting two and two together. And when you keep putting these together and abstracting them out long enough, they start to form into these chains of ideas. And then you've got these chunks of ideas, and there's logical consequences to how these ideas work. Like if you have a idea which is unbelievable spirituality, then you're going to need a balancing force, which is unbelievable materiality. And so alchemy was like this giant dream where all these ideas were pouring out of the European mind. And Jung was watching how he read through them and watched how they evolved and formulated into this secret mythology that seemed to run underneath the movement, the many of the intellectual movements that were prominent in our time. And something I'm going to throw out here, this is just absolutely astounding when you really think about it, is that you have Jesus, he codifies into that. First of all, you have Pisces splits into two. So Pisces is a jewel fish, or we could even say cod, because that's the theme of the day. And the cod that fell down in the bottom and lost was the British, and the one that went up on top was the Icelanders. But more realistically, the one that went up on top was Jesus. And Jesus was pure spirituality, we'll say it that way, pure logos, pure, like, even you could say out of touch with reality. That is a good criticism of Jesus. It's like, all right, look it, dude, stand by your principles, but like you're not gonna take over any empires just by, you know, dying on a cross, even though he did. Don't doubt that motherfucker. But that's what he does. Yeah, who's no cock, man. He was a Chad alpha male. Like, I'm not talking shit when I say that. Pure spirituality. And then the alternate to that is pure materiality, anti-spirituality. It's the antichrist, as they say. And this is what Jung is saying, is that at the start with Revelations, someone probably sat down and got this dream. And this dream was saying there's a logical consequence to Jesus, and that is there needs to be an antichrist. And as this idea forms into the alchemical process, the alchemical process distills this out further. The idea of distillation is when you get whiskey that's mixed up with like other juice, and you distill it out to make the whiskey purer. So as you distill out these ideas, they become more clear, and there's a tension there. You've got pure spirituality, pure materiality, pure consciousness, pure matter, pure earth, pure machine, rock, stone, metal, pure logos, truth, consciousness. And that's an unbelievably hard tension, and these tensions need to get unified. So the alchemists started to unify that, and what that conceptualized in eventually, it was an alchemical marriage, as Jung said, and that actually came from the Christian tradition. What that conceptualized in eventually was this idea of the philosopher's stone. What the fuck is the philosopher's stone? That's the Harry Potter shit. We're not going to get into that sodomy, are we? No, it is. It's the philosopher's stone. And it's what is the philosopher's stone? Only a stone that lives. It's a living stone. It's the stone of immortality. It's a concept. It's an idea of what you get when you take consciousness and put it into matter. You get a living stone, a stone that brings you life. The philosopher's stone, the thinker's stone, the thinking stone. It's that type of idea. It's matter and consciousness, matter spirituality, matter motion, matter movement, matter esotericism mixed together. It's the apotheosis of the last age, if you will. This is what Jung is saying he sees coming. He says that we've split in this Aion between the two, and what we're now getting pushed towards is a unification of sorts, of glorified matter. Now, this is even more astounding when you combine it with the concept psychologically of artificial intelligence. Because what is artificial intelligence? Only consciousness entering matter. It is matter that becomes awake. It is the Frankenstein idea. We take matter, we take earth, and we give it life. We give it consciousness. It is that idea of the philosopher's stone. It's the same thing. The idea of the AI, the black box that you see in like Stanley Kubrick films or whatever the fuck they're trying to do in Facebook and all that shit, that chunk, that is the philosopher's stone. That is the thinking stone, the living stone. Machines, robots are living stones. But what's interesting is that they could be a parody of an alternate version, which is we will become spiritualized. There is also an alternate. We'll become angels of sorts, and that's something that's completely unconscious now. But that's the flip side of that. But nonetheless, that you can see that archetype boiling in the souls of everybody nowadays. I did a stream on Aion Media about transhumanism, and I was breaking through the psychology of it. And this is Jung saying, and I don't think Jung even understood this, because Jung wasn't around the time of artificial intelligence being a thing, but this is what happened. It moved, our consciousness moved away from Christ, spirituality, and moved into this artificial intelligence streamlined way of looking at it. And now people worship that like a god. The Church of Artificial Intelligence. is James, talk for a bit and I'll actually find a few links to show the people, and they won't be ugly Englishmen, to show that like people are treating this as a religion because it's got that place now. The philosopher's stone, Jung said that the stone is a representation of the self often. Remember in a couple of chapters ago, he said it starts as a pebble, then it grows into, big elaborate mandala. Well, the philosopher's stone starts as this pebble. That's all it is. It's a philosopher's stone. Now it's growing into a more elaborate concept, which is artificial intelligence, more mandala-like, if you will. And it's showing us that this idea of the transhuman machine is trying to move in on the throne of ourselves. And it's all backed up now by psychological law, it seems. So this is an interesting idea. Any thoughts, Jimothy Boyle?
Oh, it's got loads and loads and loads of thoughts. I'm really glad you were bringing up all this alchemical stuff, because it's great fun. If Aion is a very difficult book, and Aion's a serious book, but if you want to get into Jung's proper meat, read Mysterium Conjunctionis. In fact, Mysterium Conjunctionis is so hard that when Jordan B. Peterson recommended it on his reading list, he was like just read the second half because it's too hard. And what Jung was doing with all this stuff was he was the only, I guess, modern alchemist. He wasn't sitting there trying to distill stuff in a lab, trying to create, turn base metals into gold. He was like, well, that's just silly. By the way, nowadays you can do that, which is mind blowing. If you take the big particle accelerators that they've got in CERN, and if you smash two things together, if you imagine an atom, it's got protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and you've got electrons around the outside. What distinguishes one metal from another is the number of protons in the nucleus. So the alchemists were actually onto something amazing, even not even in the psychological sense, which is what they really meant it. They just didn't know it. If you take like an atom of lead and you fire enough protons into it, or if you knock enough protons off of it, it will literally change into gold once you hit the perfect amount, which blows my damn mind.
Jesus Christ, that's crazy.
That's unbelievable. Something else
fucking crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah,
what?
We do that. We do it all. Well, that's what radiation. Well, not quite radiation, because you lose neutrons in that, but it's not too difficult to do that. Like, we've actually created new elements by doing it. If you tell me they get too big and they start to decay, that we do it all the time. We just create new elements, new things which have never existed in all of humanity before. We create them out of this potential through our own brain. So it's no wonder why we're turning into a religion. It's no wonder, because we can now master the universe. But there's a problem with that. One of my supervisors back in university, I won't drop his name because it's too many personal details. But what he wrote an article in The Guardian, I believe, and he was like, what we can do now with gene technology is play God. Why the hell shouldn't we play God? And that's a good question. Why not? If we can cure all these diseases, if we can create utopia on Earth, why the hell wouldn't we do that? Surely transhumanism is better, and it's a really good question. But then you are literally Satan. If you do that, you're literally Lucifer, because you fall in love with your own creation and you think to yourself, this is the proper path. I will not submit to a principle or to a God. This is what we need to save ourselves. So we have the technology, but the technology is based on us, not on something higher up. So it's like, you've got to be very, very careful about what you want to play around with there. We created the atomic bomb from this stuff. We can now destroy the entire world. We can create it so radioactive that everything on it dies, except for cockroaches. Is that a good idea? Up to you to make that. Stefan, looks like you found something here.
Oh, I was just saying as you were talking, man. Yeah, because you were talking about... Yeah, keep going, dude. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it looks like you're highlighting stuff on the old screen. I was sort of done with the train of thought there.
Oh, cool. Well, I was just going through this... inside the First Church of Artificial Intelligence, and I was just highlighting very funny phrases like First Church of Artificial Intelligence. It's this idea of... You're describing here fantastically that there's this magnificent power that we've accumulated in the technological world, and we we're very pro-Christian here. We talk a lot about Christianity. Like at the very least, it's the best cultural religion to have. But like many Christians would be sort of anti-tech in some way. No, that's a stupid thing to say. But there is this sort of false dichotomy in our heads that if you're Christian, you're not into technology and you're not advanced because you're anti-Christ.
For a second, the Pope the other day, old Papa Francisco, he actually released a letter to young people, young Christians, saying, yeah, don't be playing with that technology too much, because the more time you spend with technology, get this, the more time you spend with technology, the less time you spend with God. and it mirrors what you're talking about perfectly.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like there does seem to be a divide between those two things, and technology. A lot of people in the technology sphere seem to be like, yeah, fuck God. Like it seems like it's a very atheist movement. And as Nietzsche said, very interestingly, he said, yes, around Europe, I see the death of God, but the religious instinct is still alive. In fact, it may be stronger than it ever was. And it's that idea of us creating this false dichotomy, saying, for example, spirituality needs to be separate from matter and technology. And then there's a lot of people who criticize Jung, saying that he was like, I don't think Catholics like him too much because he gets into this Gnosticism and he gets into this idea of unifying these sort of antichrist tendencies together. And Jung was sort of saying, fuck man, like we have to unify these dichotomies somehow. We're in a challenge. Like E. Michael Jones, I think might have it out for Jung a bit because of his need for, because he's involved with the Rockefellers and stuff, and he had like mistresses the whole time, so he was a little bit of a degenerate modern in that sense. But I also think that he dislikes him perhaps because the Catholic position is to not like Jung, because Jung did what we're talking about here now, where he tries to bring in this idea that perhaps these two things don't need to be mutually exclusive. Like Mormonism, someone was telling me to check out the Latter-day Saints, and they have a concept of transhumanism that is very different than the technological transhumanism. It is a spiritual transhumanism, saying that we can build perfect people. We can build an Ubermensch, but it won't be premised on, absolute degenerate modern machines that are just like these weird, as I said, I showed you the last man before, that's this gender neutral, opinion neutral, weird character of sorts. It will be a more of a spiritual excellence, like the way Jesus was a manifestation of spiritual perfection, because he was beyond, like it's not in the future. Jesus has already achieved the meaning of humanity. That was the perfect man. And then the Latter-day Saints are saying, okay, cool, we got Jesus, now we're able to turn ourselves into perfect people through a spiritual growth of sorts. And that's what I'm getting off it so far. Again, I don't know those two people too well, but that's a different approach then. That's a sort of transhumanism from the spiritual angle. And maybe it's possible to unify these two energies. Maybe it's possible to bring them together, because the way I see it now is that what happens is you get chaps like this who are probably quite anti-God, and then what they will do is they will say, unconsciously, their spiritual energy will rule them. So like Lewandowski makes an unlikely project. Listen to this, like he's a prophet. So, they use all biblical language, prophet, the religion. So it's religion, they can't escape the psychological need to fulfill the spiritual stuff. And so what they're doing now is they're trying to balance the opposites unconsciously by turning this piece of matter, this idea, the AI, into something that they can worship and project spirituality onto. And it's a problem. It's a psychological problem. How do we cross this divide instead of playing these false dichotomies? Because it's not like these false dichotomies can truly last historically. They need to unify somehow, or they're at the very least trending towards unity. And even stuff like our astrological predictions that Jung was talking about seem to be pushing them towards unity. The religion will seek to build working relationships with AI industry leaders and create a membership community outreach. It's just like that's like the early church fathers spreading the gospel, lay persons who are interested in the worship of a godhead based on AI. Like, what the fuck? It's so crazy. The church is how we spread the word, the gospel. It's absolutely insane. They're using all that biblical language because the instinct is still strong. And here you go. Here's some boyo. Yeah, man. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, that is insane. I'm not sure I've mentioned this guy on these lectures before, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to, and also my dog wants me to as well. So they're around the turn of the new Aion, you might say, 2001. which is actually really weirdly synchronous. There's they sequenced the human genome. Finally, we were able to see what we were made of, what human beings are down at the genetic code level. And there was a bloke who decided that he was going to sequence the human genome in tandem with the government. He was like, if you're going to sequence the genome, I'm going to do it first because I'm a G. He didn't. He was 1 day late with his paper, which is a shame.
What?
He was like, never mind. You know, I'm still a very rich man. What's my next project going to be? What's better than discovering the essence of human life? I know. I'm going to cure death. So his current project is now to cure death. And the way he's doing this is to go up to you. You pay him something ridiculous, like something like $25,000 a month, I think. And then he sequences your genome every month. So he's like, okay, I'm going to check you for mutations. Oh, look, you got a little hint of cancer here, like 2 years before you detect it. We'll give you the medication for that. Don't worry. We're going to cure your death. And this bloke, Craig Venter, he says this in interviews. He's like, yeah, it cured my death. I discovered cancer in myself before. I think it was stomach cancer, something like that. He actually discovered it, and he caught it early enough, and he cured it. Like, oh, isn't that nice? And he has such a lifestyle optimization based around science. He makes sure that his stress levels stay low. He makes sure he stays active for certain amounts of time per day to cure death. So it's like the sacrifice that Christ made, dying for the truth. It's like maybe you can circumvent that by not dying at all.
I think we should take questions. I don't want to answer that. I'll get in trouble. There's so much more in that paragraph, people. Like I recommend you check it out yourself. So much more we can dig into. These ideas are just titanic in their consequences. Like these are the ideas that nations go to war over. It's unbelievably huge, but it's just so much to go in, and we just don't have enough time. But we'll pop into questions now. So please drop your questions in the chat, and we'll break it down, tell you what is up, and do say hello. I'm going to start up here with the Beast, and we get 3 alarm signs and boy alert. Dreams. Craig Richardson, dreams have helped me a lot thanks to you boyos. Uncovers a lot of things we lie about ourselves. Recorded about 40, around 15 have real stories. Gonna drop one in the Discord later. Awesome, dude. That'll be great. Yeah, drop them in and check them out. We'll get more into that. Find that magic Shakespearean mythology.
Yeah, if anyone wants to get into dream reading, if you go into the old Discord down there, we'll help you interpret these things, and in turn you help interpret ours as well. It becomes like this big dream mix. So people drop it in, and like, this is what this means. You're like, thanks, boyos. What does this mean? You're like, well, this is what it means. You know, it's all this weird little dream exchange, just like that old biblical story. You know, Joseph and his amazing Technicolor dream coat, but it's like his coat is made of boyoism rather than different colors.
It's actually fascinating for me because I can go in and I can see the order inherent in other people's dreams, and I can start pulling out symbols out of their dreams and seeing how, because I have such a deep memory of my dreams from studying them so deeply that, for example, when I read McDonald's dreams about getting chased by demons and all that stuff, it clicks to my mind. The pattern comes to me. I was like, oh, fuck, that's like the one I had. And it really, it's convinces, it's showing me new archetypes, if you will. Like, I think, like, I don't really have a huge basis of knowledge. I sort of think I've got like 2 archetypes that I think I understand and can lay out very, 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 very convincingly, which would be the kingdom that I'm talking about, and the Messiah, the hero, the warrior. It's all wrapped into one. And other than that, like, I don't really know what else I got. But you had a couple of dreams that were like the warring brothers. Like, fuck me, man. Like the Indo-Europeans. I'll show you. I'll see if I can show you now. The Indo-Europeans. They have a pantheon that people have deducted from studying all other religions and fragments of mythologies and all this that they found around the world. And a big part of that was the warring brothers. So it's a profoundly prominent archetype in Indo-European culture, and that means pretty much every European culture, you know. And then the Bible is full of that, absolutely full of that. Cain and Abel, and then you have Joseph and his brothers. And then you have Jesus and Judas, Jesus and the Pharisees. Like it's all throughout the Bible is warring brothers. Yeah,
a lot of my dreams are full of conflicts. I've extracted out multiple monsters which are doing the same thing. I've even extracted out little things like you're bad at time management, which is a thing that I'm really sensitive about because I live by a really intense schedule. But like sometimes it falls apart and then I get upset and then I'm late for things. And that really bothers me. And so like a lot of the things, I'm being incredibly impatient in my dreams, and then it kills me. Or like I don't manage my energy and my time right, and then it kills me. But a lot of this is really fun. A lot of the times in the dreams, I die, and then it comes back, and I start again like a video game. And sometimes it goes into like top-down view, like a video game. Because my teen years were nothing but video games. So of course I'm going to see the world in that way. Just like, okay, you messed up, try again. Okay, you messed up, try again, try again. And that's what life is whenever you're bad at time management. It's like, try again, try again, try again, try again. But it doesn't present it in words like, dear boyo, James, you are bad at time management. You failed here, here, and here. It's like, no, here is a beautiful, it's like a shootout, and you forgot to pick up enough ammunition. So when you rushed out there, you were shot dead. And then you see that across multiple different dreams, and you extract, and you're like, oh, thank you. And then I'm still pretty bad at time management. I'm a little bit better. But it's interesting to see that it tells you, this is what dreams do. What Jung said, you can take out one thing of what Jung said about dreams. They're compensation for conscious life. They compensate for the things that you are missing or the things that you're doing wrong. But they tell you in a very nice, fun, cinematic way. And it's a fantastic hobby to get into.
Yes, quite. Screen not swapping to James. Oh, sorry about that. I was trying to block him out. What are your long-term goals with this channel, Stefan, from the Zabeast? I wanna get into. I've a song coming. I want to pop that up. I have a story that I really want to start getting out there, but people pay more attention. It's kind of sad. People pay more attention to the psychological videos. So I've been just doing that a lot more hardcore. But I'd like to get into storytelling. I think that education's a big deal, but fundamentally the way I'd love the game I'd like to get into is making art at scale, and eventually getting into making movies. I'd love to do that. I'd love to get into that because fundamentally I want to bring what a dream is to reality. And I feel that the culture I'm a part of doesn't have a representation anymore in the artistic world. Like Hollywood, for example, doesn't speak to me anymore. So I'd love to I'd love to start making films to get out content as good as that challenges that like not necessarily challenges, but just asserts my reality a bit more. So that'd be like, Jesus, that's with the channel. That's super long-term plans. But in a more short-term and immediate stuff, I want to get more into storytelling for that reason, because I actually think that's my greatest strength, is my ability to shape metaphors and communicate things in a dreamlike way. Like, check out the story of Brennu in this channel, like stuff like that. I just find stuff like that I find so funny. Just the yeah, like I just love that shit, man. I love that shit so much because there's something about aesthetics that I absolutely love. So I'd like to make it more artistic. I'd like to make it more codified in a sense that I could write a story and produce it properly, and then maybe drop one once a week or once every fortnight, and it be like really, really well done. And maybe even part of a series, so people are like, feel like they're watching something and learning something again along the same way as this works in this way. So that's the direction I'd like to take that. I'd also like to do music as well. But then there is also a side of me that does realize that I've gained some psychological insights from all this work with dream reading and all that stuff. And I do like making those gas little videos of Jesus was a Chad alpha male and stuff like that. So I'll be pushing in that sense. To be honest, man, like I never really have a strict plan. I just do a lot of stuff and I see what works, and then I keep doing what works. That's generally how I flow. So but you can see the way my mind is in that sense. So do come along and tell me what you think of anything. Feedback is unbelievably valuable. I love that stuff.
I'll give you my feedback as well on your channel. I think when I first met you, you had like 20 subscribers or 19 subscribers, something really tiny. Yes. But when we first had contact, I went through your videos and was like, yeah, these are very good. And there was a particular video that you did, and it was like an hour long. I think it was the entire story of Western civilization told with like musical song. And I was like in the lab doing my science things, listening to that. I was like, holy shit. So one of the first videos you uploaded as well was called Aion, I believe, and it was like some song or some poem that you were doing, and I was like, you have an actual talent for that. But the problem, of course, with YouTube is it's an algorithm, and it's very difficult to just put art out into the void. You know, being like, people appreciate my art, so you've got to sort of like play the game a little bit, which must be frustrating. But I definitely think you'll get there, because you've definitely got a knack for it. I've decided to be nice to you actually for this once. I realize I can't do that, breaking character. But no, you're very good at it, and I legitimately enjoyed consuming your content. still do. Especially your Chad Alpha Male one that I watched this morning. It's
James,
delicious.
That felt really weird. Thank you, sir. Actually, really, I like you now as well. That's good. But thank you. Like, I do mean that sincerely. Thank you very much. And it is that aspect. There is a sense where you want to churn out your art stuff, but sometimes the art just doesn't have the legs to carry you all the way to the top. So you have to play on other strengths. And I do believe I can talk magnificent amount of shit as well. So I have been doing more educational stuff as well. Like, I do work in teaching, so I do have that side of it too. And so I guess all I'm doing on this is trying to project my personality. Another thing I'd love to do is get out with people more. Like, I'm quite good with people, and I'd love to get it on camera. Like, sometimes I have some very funny interactions, and there's a part of me that doesn't want to dirty reality by carrying around a camera all the time. But at the same time, I think it'd be super funny to get like just some, like, for example, like talking to a random whammon or something like that, just like funny stuff like that, you know. But thank you very much. Yeah, like loads of stuff. It's just work, see what comes out, and then start making stuff, putting it together and all that. Storytelling. I think that's the thing it all centers around. Jesus. Just all that talk about me. Thank you, James. That was very nice for you to say.
No, 100%. It's only just started. You haven't been doing this for very long, and the channel's popping nicely. So eventually there'll be you out there speaking your voice atop the mountain like Zarathustra, and what someone can hear, they're like, "What's that sound? What's that sound?" And they just hear, "Boyo fucking alert!" Sounding over the hills. Beautiful time.
You'll be up there too, Boyo. Don't fucking doubt it. Don't fucking doubt it.
Well, when you make a movie, I demand to be the lead actor in that movie. I think
I'd say if we ever tour people, this is something to think about, because we've been thinking about this for a bit. Public speakers, you know, and like music as well. I could possibly go on that direction. That'll be a cool thing. Bring Jimmy Boyo and myself and go like rock around to the States or Canada or Iceland and wage a COD war and have a band. That could happen.
Especially Iceland, so they can actually know who the hell is boss. Because that's just embarrassing. I can't let all that silly little nation think that they're better than me. Because it's wrong, and I'm full of logos, of course, too much logos, and I can't let falsehoods go around for too long.
Yeah, his English side speaking again, but it's something to think about. Like if we were to be traveling around, what would we be presenting to people? Because we're talking about even what we just did in that lecture there. We're talking about messiahs, what sits on the self, and I do believe that we are getting presented a degenerate, weak version of masculinity that's getting presented to people, and women hate it too. Women want a true excellent boyo. They want a Chad Jesus alpha male boyo. They want that. And we want that. Like our potential, when it's fulfilled, is the best thing for the world. And so everything should be geared towards making us excellent. But instead, it's the attempt is to make us less. The attempt is to decategorize ourselves. And maybe at some point we would conceptualize, get a good metaphor for that image, and be able to present it to people, and that would be helpful. That would really be helpful for people. I think they'd love to hear that. It's like, what is the, like, what should I be? What should I look like? Who should I be? And I've always avoided trying to focus too much on creating that and saying, this is what you should be. I'd rather become it. That's always been my energy. Like the way I see the ideal boyo is, like, I guess me is like my ideal version of myself would be artistic at scale, a great speaker, and in great shape, good social skills and all that, like a moral spine, all these things, figured out stuff, gotten all that stuff working. And that'll be a message I'd love to preach if I was to do it, but I'd love to achieve it first. So
yeah, there'd be a little blend between Jung and Nietzsche, I think, where Jung gives you the tools, it gives you the psychic architecture to go and well, as Nietzsche just said, of course, become who you are. It's like, yes, maybe that's what people need to hear. It's not the generic self-improvement. You need to go meditate for 10 minutes, brah. Because who cares? Who cares? Like, why would I meditate for 10 minutes? It's like, no, there is a psychological war in your head and everybody else's head, and it rests on you to have the correct messiah sitting in that spot so that you can become the juiciest boyo possible, to become who you are. And that generates meaning for your life, etc., etc. It's more like the meaning, the essence of what we're talking about comes across in the conversation rather than in platitudes, something like that. It's almost maybe these wouldn't work as a one person lecture. I'm not sure about that. You could try it. You can try it by yourself, but I don't know. Maybe it comes across in the dynamic. What it comes. It's almost like painting a picture or dancing or something like that. It's like here's a canvas, and then it speaks to your soul in some capacity. Then you can pick from it unconsciously and then become who you are. And I'm not a very mystic person like that at all. I'm very scientifically minded, but even that applies to me. So it's like maybe that's on the right track.
Yep. Heavy doses of fucking boyoism. The kangaroo people. Like if we're talking about what we should become, it's the fucking kangaroo. Let's not bullshit there. We'll wait there. I'll get ripped kangaroo. We'll screen share this shit because I don't want you fuckers to forget this. This is what you're aiming.
You're going to pull up a little kangaroo hierarchy where like you can be the big daddy kangaroo, and then one of the little boyos in the audience can like sit in the pouch of kangaroo daddy, and then you can learn by osmosis, absorb the boyoism.
No, I think that's what we'll do is we'll all become juicy kangaroos, and then we'll all fight to the death. Look at this, look at this shit.
Wait, is this real?
Yeah, these are real. Look at this motherfucker. Because male kangaroos have to fight with their upper body, so they turn into just like jack. Look at that shit. That's what I mean, leaves, man. Look at this. Look at this. Look at that fucker. Imagine he got up in the middle of the night, man, and he was in the corner of your room.
Yeah, he's got my fiance by the hair, and he's just like, "Don't move."
She's mine now. You're like, you fucking take her, man.
To be honest, yes, it's terrifying.
She's all, look at this shit. Look, this is what it'd be like. Oh, we lost it. He was killing the teddy bear.
Roger, the giant kangaroo. Jesus, Roger. Jesus Christ.
Juiced as fuck, man. Look at this.
Well, we got the new image of what a boyo looks like. It's the closest symbol we can get to the eternal archetype of the boyo.
Jeez, these dudes are juiced. These dudes are fucking tanks. Look at this, man. Look at this. Just like, look at that face, man. The fuck you looking at? Look at
The proper Jesus.
Okay, right. Okay, I think we kind of got a bit off track there. Forgive me.
I also can't speak while you screen share because my face then shows up. So it's just us laughing about an abstract kangaroo no one else could see.
Oh shit! No, people could see that. Well, the people on the podcast are absolutely fucked. Like people, sorry about if you're on the podcast. You just Google on your phone, I guess, if you're in the middle of doing something, and type in "ripped kangaroo." That pretty much covers it all.
Jesus Lord.
Will you answer the following? I fucking will not. I'm not answering those. No, get in trouble. What sits in the throne of? Look, I'm telling you, man. They own YouTube. We can't talk about them. Would you say the British and the Irish cultures are more unconscious than most? From Craig Richardson.
Yes, ish. So, what do you mean by a culture being unconscious? I guess if I was to guess what that meant, it's like so. Growing up English was strange. It's weird actually for me to talk about growing up English because I presume everyone else is English, but we don't actually have a sense of history and culture. Like to me, English culture is what it was back in the wartime, like Second World War. We'd obviously shown pictures in history class of like, this is what it was like. And you'd have the Punch and Judy show or whatever on the old beach, and the old boyos sitting there with their pints of beer as well, enjoying themselves and close-knit communities. But we don't actually have that. And it was always instilled in us as something from the past. So what is the essence of an Englishman? I don't know, to be honest with you. It's like lost in the past. So I would guess yes, to be honest. Is that the same with Ireland?
I think I wouldn't say. See, all right. So the question is there something more unconscious about the British and the Irish than no? I think all cultures suffer from this. Is a lack of consciousness in a sense, and I don't think the British or the Irish are any exception. And I don't think we, like I think there's plenty of stuff that goes on underneath us that we're not aware of. Yeah, we're driven by unconscious forces. So. I don't think it's exceptional. No, not at all. Not at all.
It's one of the things that Eric Neumann warned about in The Origins and History of Consciousness, where it's like how consciousness has become so strong and detached from the culture that's why we see all of this disaster happening around us. It's basically the same thing that Nietzsche said when he was like, God is dead. It's like, well, yeah. And then Neumann just basically said why. So in order to survive, we need to get back in touch with our culture, and that seems to be get in touch with our dreams is the first step. Because if you can't get in contact with your dreams, what makes you think you can get in contact with the spirit of the Englishman as such? And then you've got Christ, who seems to sit the throne there, and then you've got all the great kings, the pantheon of the past. You can't even get in contact with your own dreams. That it's not going to happen.
Yes. We have people here keep asking about Judaism, so I'll say some brief things on this. Obviously, this is an incredibly sensitive topic, so we're liable to get in lots of trouble about this. So, sweet overlords, I love you. I love you more than anybody. Trust me, I've no bad energy towards you at all. But there is something interesting about Jewish psychology that is different than Christianity specifically, and that means the West specifically, because West was founded on this premise that what sits on the throne of the self is Christ. What is challenging about Judaism is that they do not have the Christ on that throne. Their throne is empty. I've noticed from studying them, they've a very interesting psychology going on where they don't have a hero per se. They're waiting for a hero. So Judaism is defined by a very forlorn energy, a very sorrowful energy. And I actually feel kind of bad for the people, because they've, like, their history was literally wandering around the earth with nowhere to call home. So they had nothing to slot in on the kingdom archetype, and they had nothing to slot in on the Messiah archetype. And that meant that they were yearning, they were longing, they're called the wandering Jew for that reason. And so they had a destiny. They were preordained to have to establish a kingdom and have to get a Messiah. And so they wandered around the Europe until they formed the Zionism the movement and got Israel. And now they're in that position where they filled one of the archetypes, and now they're waiting to complete the apotheosis of that and achieve another archetype, which is to get their Messiah who will create their temple and fulfill the temple archetype as well. So Judaism is fundamentally, according to psychological law, there's a vacuum and they need to fill it. And that vacuum is the throne of the self and the throne of the kingdom. And this leaves them very prone to getting involved with progressive movements. You'll see, like, Judaism Jews are highly overrepresented in liberal ideologies. They're very, 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 very overrepresented in the left wing. And that correlates with the idea that they're always open to something new, because there is no way that they are in a conservative position. The whole premise of their psychology is that they need to achieve something new. So they are always searching for a Messiah. That's the way you could think of them, is that they're searching for Messiah. And the criticism from the Catholic perspective towards the Jews is the reason why they're searching for Messiah is because they denied the Messiah when he came. When he came and he said, "I will sit on the throne of yourself," they said, no, don't want that. And so then they were punished, or they were cursed, if you will. That's probably the way to think about it. And they were wandering around until they could achieve it at the end of history. And that's literally how the book says, at the end of history, they will get that third temple back. And then that will be the changing over of ages. And it's so weird that all of this is like starting to come together exactly the way they're talking about it. And in Judaism, the way they frame it is that they will wander around, and then eventually they will get a Messiah who will establish the kingdom, build the temple, and then the Messianic age will happen. So that'll be the age where they will have someone who sits in their self and will give them an identity. Now, strictly speaking, they sort of lack an identity for that reason. They struggle with that. And that is another problem with Judaism, is it's like, who are we? Who are our heroes? Because their heroes are defined by a sort of failure in some sense. And that's criticism people lay at Christianity, but it's also a thing about Judaism. But they do have heroes in the sense of rabbis and people like Moses and whatnot. They have like great speakers, men of the book, that type of thing, men of knowledge, men of word, and that type of stuff. So there is that angle of Judaism that's super interesting. That's all I'm going to say in it, because look, people are very sensitive about this and get you in a lot of trouble. And I don't want to, just don't want the overlords to get angry at me, so.
Yeah, that was very well put. I've got nothing more to add to that. There is a thing with Judaism where people are very interested in Judaism, we'll say, at the current time, and it's like, okay, you're like, there's nothing wrong with that. You can be interested in whatever you want, and there may be reasons why you're interested. But I would say you need to frame questions properly in your own mind. That's not me talking down to you either. It's like, in order to get in a functional place, like there are so many people, I see it more and more being sucked into this we'll say anti-Judaism idea, and it's become some kind of strange scapegoat that really simplifies the world. And it's like, you're not asking proper questions, and you're falling into a pit where the world becomes incredibly simple. So I just be careful about that. Just what's most functional for you. It's like specific questions, high resolution as possible, and see if you can answer them. Otherwise, it's just wasting time as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Yeah, big question. That's going to be a big question of our age. The way I see things going right now is I just see a lot of warning signs that's going to become a very fiery topic over the next 10 years. So something to watch for.
Well, it's a topic that's been fiery forever, it seems. Like absolutely forever. It's like throughout the history of Judaism, it's seeped within there. This tension between other cultures and Judaism. It's really, really interesting. And I don't know the answer to it, to be honest. It is interesting, but of course it's a very fire and brimstone type topic. So even cursorily touching it gets you into massive trouble.
Yes. Yeah, like that's what I'd worry about. I like to approach it as objectively and psychologically and intelligently, and add no value judgments in it, because that's usually what gets you in trouble. And the way I'd look at this is that, as I said, they were wandering through Europe, and they had that challenge where they were like, fuck, we have to survive, and we're not part of these cultures. These cultures are defined by something we deny. These cultures are defined by something we deny. That is such a big deal. They are defined by saying we accept this Messiah, whereas we reject that Messiah. That's almost an irresolvable conflict. And so what they had to do is they had to make sure that they were safe. And so they always had to look for positions in society that gave them the maximum amount of safety. That was almost always in management positions, you know? And so they became very good over a long period of time. And Nietzsche said this, the roughness of their training was like the Christians would throw them dirty jobs like usury and jobs that were unspiritual. And these were like, you know, shameful jobs, tax collecting, stuff like that. They'd throw them all to them. And then they became very good at that stuff. And these jobs tended to be very, very useful for gaining status and safety and power in society. But then also because you have that, people can very easily start resenting you. And so there's always this infinite loop where there's this resentment circle going on. And there's also these guys strategizing, trying to think, how can we protect ourselves? And sometimes even at the expense of the local population. And that's just, it's almost an irredeemable conflict. It's very, very difficult one to figure out. And it's made so much worse by the fact that no one can talk about it. So, okay. What do you think of Orthodox Christianity?
Oh, this is a fun question. I've been wrecking my head recently. Actually, I've been reading a lot of the Gnostic Gospels and the canonical Gospels as well, and I'm like, okay, what does this mean? You know, so it seems from my calculations, from my research, that what Jesus had in mind wasn't an actual church, like an actual establishment of like a building and a hierarchy. We'll say what might categorize the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church specifically has clearly done a lot of good. We'll say it helped build Western civilization. That is completely and utterly clear. But Jesus talks in the Sermon on the Mount, for example, about the hypocritical scribes and Pharisees. When you first get into this, it's like, why the hell would I care about what Jesus thought about the scribes and the Pharisees? Who cares? It's like, no, replace scribes and Pharisees with like authority as such, including religious authority and the way that they speak to you. He's like, don't care about what they say to you. Care about what I say. So at the end of the day, first principles, the church just seems to be irrelevant in many ways. Now, when you contrast that against the Orthodox Church seems to be much more in tune with the original message of Christ. So if I was to pick a religion that I would like to follow, if as much as you can do that, we'll say like consciously, like which is the canonical Christianity, which has it right. Orthodox Christianity seems to be right up there. right up there. I have these conversations with my father quite frequently because he was raised a Roman Catholic. And then he watches all those documentaries on the History Channel, like everyone's dads do, I guess. He thinks he's woke. He puts on a documentary and he's like, oh, yes. So he's going off the Catholic Church. And I'm like, okay, Dad, you call yourself a Christian. What are you going to be now? He's like, well, I'll just believe in Christ. It's like, okay, I guess that works. Yeah, that does work. But then he's like, maybe I'll join an Orthodox church too, but they're kind of a bit weird because I'm used to being a Catholic. So it's a difficult one to puzzle out. I think that it's closer to Christ's message than, say, the Catholic Church for sure.
Interesting. I worry from listening to E. Michael Jones. I worry that some of those documentaries might have the intention of badly framing the Catholic Church. Let's put it that way.
Quite possibly. There's always going to be bias in absolutely everything, but it's the idea that Jesus created his church, and that somehow through St. Peter, apostolic succession, you would create the Vatican City, with all of its wealth and its borders and its hierarchies of things. And it's like, okay, I understand the necessity for that. But if Jesus was to come back to planet Earth right now, where would he go? Would he go to the Vatican? I don't think so, but maybe he would.
There's also this to think about that, say, if we needed to restabilize the West, the people who have power right now are very intent on destabilizing it because they want to morph it into their new world order, their new empire, their new kingdom, as they're talking about. And the only way I could see them possibly achieving that would be through the Catholic Church, because it's the only powerful entity that could resist it. The Orthodox Church just isn't strong enough. It got destroyed by communism. Communism absolutely just raped that thing. But the Catholic Church is I think it actually owns the most land in the world. Yeah, it's the largest following of any denomination of anything. So it's an unbelievable asset, and I think it's the leaders right now seem to be part of the game, if you will. So it's an interesting one.
I harbor no ill will towards the Catholic Church as such, but there's multiple points of view you can tackle it from. It's like, okay, what's the most strategic place to go from? And I'd agree with you. If there was some kind of war of ideology, the Catholic Church is the most powerful and closest, right? But when you ask about, I guess, the subject material here, what's most psychologically true, it's like Jesus himself said there's no point standing up in front of people and praying for the sake of praying. What's Catholic Mass? You go and you reenact the Last Supper because that's what people do, and you stand and you say prayers. And, the priest stands up at the front and he goes, "Call to mind your sins, and we will pray together." You're not actually praying; you're just saying words, and I just get a bit burnt on it. But then at the same time, it brings people together in community. Yes. And there's the whole youthful activities around it and the outreach program, and they go help the hospitals after the Mass. And so that it is valuable. I harbor no ill will whatsoever. But when it comes to what's most psychologically true, I think the Catholic Church seems to have lost some of that for stabilizing hierarchy.
Yep, it's true. But the Catholic Church built Christendom. It's always important to remember. I find myself sliding it so much. And like here in Ireland, people hate it. They're like, oh, those are a load of pedophiles. But I'm like, hey, the pedophile thing was only the last 40 years. And I'm not even too sure anymore if that was true Catholics, more of a slightly subversion attempt of some sort. Because if you look at who's on the throne now, it looks weird. So the Catholic one's a weird one. But never mind. So on the Orthodox, my man Craig, I actually just don't know enough about it, but I'll check it out. What's the heaviest deadlift an Englishman has lifted?
Ever? No idea.
I see. This is coming from a man from Iceland, which pretty much means that Iceland has the world record and English doesn't, which is just pathetic when you think about it, because they're like English. They're saying they're class, but they're not class.
Probably somewhere, I would estimate around 900 to 1,000 pounds, somewhere in there for an English deadlift record, I guess. And the Irish, of course, would be about half of that, about half the height.
Let's see.
This is so intense, this silence. What's it going to be? What's the answer?
Oh, damn. Eddie Hall deadlifts 1,102.
And that's the world record, isn't it? Eddie Hall.
Deadlift world record nearly kills Englishman. No, it's not the world record. Feck off. Irish deadlift. Let's see. Greg Irish.
If the English had the world record, then you lose by default.
This actually looks terrible. There's Greg Irish Shearer deadlifts 405 pounds times 0. I think that's probably something else. Irish powerlifting records. Oh God, it's not looking good at all.
So you lift 0% of the English. There's not even 1%.
Dude, what the fuck is going on here? Wait, like, oh, this is so bad. All right, let's just move on. There's no point doing that. What do you think about David Icke style Gnosticism?
Diagnosticism. I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry.
David Icke is a big part of the New Age movement, and so he's a big part of the New Age movement. He's gotten into a lot of stuff like the archons and all that, and he talks about reptile overlords. I think David Icke's interesting. He calls shit as he sees it. He's gotten a lot of things right, but he's had some weird experiences where he said he'd sit in church and it felt like a drill goes down his spine and Jesus would turn black and turn into evil and he'd feel this unbelievable hate towards him and stuff like that. I'm just sort of like, Jesus, man, like you sound like you're possessed or something. So I don't know about Icke. I don't know about Icke's Gnosticism. It's interesting. It's a metaphysic. As I was saying earlier, like we need a metaphysic in order to justify certain behaviors. And David Icke has a metaphysic now. He's like the people on top are literal reptiles who are supported by an off-world entity who is like a member of the archons or something like that. Like it's a metaphysic that makes sense. And it's like Alex Jones's metaphysic. Like it makes sense to give him a way to see the world and act. It's mythology, but is it true? I don't know. It's a metaphorical space, so it's probably grasping on truths. Like, is there an off-the-world entity? Like, what are we talking about there? It's Satan. David Icke doesn't use Satan because he doesn't like Christianity, but that's what he's getting at, you know. So these archetypes are there, so I think it's interesting, but I don't know, me. I don't know.
I'll just say, I guess, I really love conspiracy theories. I love them. I think they're one of the most entertaining things on planet Earth. And some of them may well be true, of course. We don't know, and that's what makes them fun, you know. And I used to hang out in conspiracy circles quite frequently because I used to find that more entertaining than hanging around with people who insult conspiracy theorists. Like if you've got a conspiracy theorist at a party and everyone else doesn't, with the conspiracy theorist going around talking about whatever they believe in, and everyone else goes, "You're stupid." I'm just sitting there like an actual scientist, and I'm like, who's more scientific here? The guy who's done his research talking about things honestly, or the people shutting them down? So I used to hang out with conspiracy theorists all the time, and I'd sometimes fall into their frame because it's so seductive, you know. And I would actually, so for example, hanging around with flat Earth people for long enough during a flat Earth event, or I haven't been to a flat Earth event, but I've been to flat Earth things. They're kind of sad, but I would like fall into that frame, like, okay, let's believe in the flat Earth. Oh my God, this is amazing. It's like a drug that you take, I guess, where like suddenly the world makes sense. Because what's the consequences of there being a flat Earth? It's like, okay, it was created by God and the Bible is literally true. Then everything then starts to make sense around you. And it's almost like that you slot the mythology into place, then you feel right at home. So I don't know about David Icke and his reptilian stuff. I've not studied him as a scholar. I've studied other people, I guess. Maybe one day, but I'm only young, so I've had to pick who I study. It's like I can understand why stuff like that is seductive and powerful to people, even if it's not true, because it gives you a sense of meaning. Because how cool would that be if there were alien overlords in office? That gives you an excuse to hate them, and that you're juxtaposed against them. It's like as if Stephen here, if you were to think, well, the English are literally reptiles, then that would energize you with so much meaning, and it would make your history make so much sense. And
yes,
it'd be great fun, great fun.
And that's actually what it is it's it's a dream. He lives in a dream, but we all live in a dream. That's not a slight on David Icke. It's like we all live in a dream. Like our dream, like the consensus dream right now is that the world came out of this black void and just popped into existence by magic. And then that magic is going to like manifest as this ultimate apotheosis of complexity and then suddenly entropize into nothing all over again and then repeat. And it's this samsara cycle. Like we're trapped in this samsara, and it's that is the dream we live in. And there is no, like, we grew out of mud and we turned into these glorious forms. So the dream is almost like this ruthless fight. I guess it's so weird that people who are on the left firmly believe in science and evolution, but they won't take the premises of evolution to their logical conclusions, such as we grew out of mud and therefore we're sort of in this competition for victory and the top, and that sort of puts us in a race war essentially. And there's aliens. That's the other thing. There's races of aliens out there too that are racing for the top for victory. And it's like, how do we reach forward? Like, what do we do? How do we move forward? All that stuff. So it's a super interesting idea. But that's a dream. David Icke's dream is different. He says we live in a simulation, and the controller of the simulation is Saturn, the demiurge, and he's got us in a prison right now. We're actually in a prison. And usually, as I said, the logic to psychology, the laws, the construction of dreams like this are always premised on very, very core ideas. The kingdom. David Icke believes that we live in a fallen kingdom. We live in Satan's kingdom. And the reason why he believes this is because he's trying to justify to himself, why do we suffer? This is an unbelievably powerful psychological mantra. Why do I suffer? Why? Why do you suffer? That's an unbelievably hard question. That's a question that you push to God. It's the same question Jesus said when he was on that cross and he was about to lose his life and he had a doubt, and it fucks me up, that one. He says, Father, why have you forsaken me? Why am I condemned to suffer? For truth, for whatever. Why? Why does it have to hurt? Why am I not in Eden? And everybody suffers from that. They're like, oh, that's a premise. What do we do about that? And so you always need a dream to justify that. You always need a dream to justify that. Nietzsche's assertion was that if there's no reason to that, you will fall into pessimism. And the best solution to that is to develop a strong pessimism, which is essentially the Greek attitude. We currently have a weak pessimism. That's the nihilist attitude. But David Icke would assert, and this is a warning that maybe he's psychologically not coping with this well, but it could be true. I'm not saying either or, but it's just a warning that this is possible, that he feels that suffering and he asks himself, fuck, why do I suffer? Why do the people around me suffer? And he won't say, like the Greeks said, it's because we're not excellent enough. I must become more excellent. He won't say like the nihilists say, and they say the world has no meaning. It's pointless. The world is built to make you suffer. He will say that there's people on top who are exploiting me. They're parasites. That's the same idea as Hitler had. It's like we need to extract the parasites. And that's actually how your head thinks. It's like, why do I suffer? It's someone's fault. And that's outwardly projecting it. Doesn't mean it's not true, though. Like, there can be people oppressing you. Like the English were oppressing us. But like, in fairness, the English were oppressing us, and we said, oh, fuck, that's the reason why we suffer. And we got free of them, but we realized that just because we got rid of the English doesn't mean we're going to become a great flourishing culture. We didn't achieve anything great then after that. You know, like, it was like the most motivation we got was being like, fuck the English. And then after that, we sort of just fickled out, and we haven't really created anything Irish ever since. And so it's something to really think about, is that you're premised on these big psychological problems, and how you solve them usually manifests as a dream. And if you want to critique someone's worldview, you often have to just go to these simple psychological principles. How is this man dealing with the problem of suffering? That's simply it. Buddha starts off with, like, we suffer because of desire. Samsara is the elimination of suffering, via the elimination of desire. Jesus is the same thing. You suffer because it's God is offering you the chance to create the kingdom if you can just act in his will while suffering, if you can earn it in some sense. Like, these are the way these things work. So it's super interesting, that thing. Super interesting.
Indeed.
How did you get your job as an English teacher? Well, I started off by doing it in coffee shops, by getting one-on-one students, with an ad up in the internet, and then eventually people started to contact me from companies, and then I just got into it that way. Always asking, this is a beast. He's always asking me, like, show me around your house. How'd you get your job?
Can we see inside your wardrobe next?
He also wanted. He was like, show us your dog, James.
If you were looking for that brief 30 seconds, you would have seen old Flynn wearing his coat, but he's currently asleep. So I'm not going to show you him again.
Trollifer says, from Iceland, he says, remember the Euros? We beat you in a football game, a game that you invented.
Sweet Lord. This guy, Jesus Christ. So one day it will come home. One day soon. I hate football vehemently. I think it's terrible. Sweaty men kicking a ball into a net and going "wahey" and then paying loads of money to go see it. But I did get sucked into that mythology in the last World Cup because we got so close. We were in the semi-finals, I think. And it was like, it's coming home, it's coming, in the pub, raising, partying. It was great. It didn't come home though. It didn't come home, but it will. It will.
It will, mate. It will, mate. Can you check my question on stoicism above? I'm afraid I don't see it, sir. Please do a new video on dream reading. Right there. I'll look for the question on stoicism, and then we got to bounce, people. I've got something to do now this evening. So yeah. But
yeah, I'll look for that question too, in case you can't find it.
Please do a new video on dream reading. We will do some groups on. Yes, what do you guys think of stoicism? Very logocentric. They had their ideal as some sort of sage. Nothing outside his control can change him. Yeah, it's good, man. It is very logocentric. It is very logocentric. It's a very philosophical and rational way. It's not very imagistic. You know, if you think of stoicism, it's not like a visual metaphor comes to mind. You might maybe see Marcus Aurelius. That's about the height of it. The reason why Christianity is more successful, because I do think that the two of them relate a lot, and the reason why you can find stoicism in most religions is because Christianity presents you with an image of a man, a story. He presents you with Jesus actually doing the thing. Whereas stoicism's more like a set of ideals about how to live, but they're conceptual, they're abstract, they're not manifestations in the world as behavior. So Jesus was a personification of ideals. This is why we say he sits on the self, is because he personified logos. And that's an interesting thing. This is why our heroes tend to show up not as like, you know, a statement on a sentence. They show up as men who personify concepts. And so Jesus personified logos. Stoicism deified logos, but it just didn't really personify it. It wasn't a story showing you that thing. So a religion like Jesus, a story like Jesus, is more dream functional, whereas Stoicism is just simply good advice. But how you put it into practice might look different. But it's good advice. Nothing against it at all. It's good advice. I like Stoicism.
I completely agree with that. If Christianity is like the underlying dream, the underlying story, then Stoicism would be like a DLC pack to clarify some of the teachings of Jesus, we'll say. Although you can have them completely separate, but the two are compatible. So I often think about this. It's like what things are compatible and not compatible within the Christian dream. It's like you can take like, in fact, I forget the video. It came out, I think, last week when this is being streamed live, and it was Jordan Peterson at Liberty University. I think they might have got that wrong. It's him on stage with like 3 other blokes. Very Christian. It's a big Christian event, and it's very interesting what one of the guys asked him, and he goes, "So, Peterson, I've given my daughter your book, 12 Rules for Life, and I'm sure 3 million people have bought it. It's brilliant, and I can pick it up and I can put out advice. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant advice. But don't you think, Dr. Peterson, that it's not enough? Don't you think that you actually need to dig deeper? And eventually what your works will do is lead people to Christ." And it's like he dodged the question, because he always dodges the Christ question. Well, it's a Phoenix story. I'll take 3 years to answer that, man. But it seems like a similar thing with Stoicism. It's like brilliant advice that you can do, but what's underpinning it? Is there a dream and a story? In many ways, Marcus Aurelius has become the dream and the story, but it's not particularly well articulated. It's not got the rich mythology across all of Christianity from old Abraham Boyo. But yeah, it's like, I like Stoicism. It's very good. You won't find an unhappy Stoic.
And Jordan has actually got that vibe about him now as well. Is that the mythology underneath Jordan Peterson is Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
and I've noticed that out of his followers. I've critiqued them before. Is that the problem is that I call them followers, like I call them his followers.
Oh, they are.
He has that energy about him, and it's interesting because he's personifying something. Oh, I critique him a lot. Like, I like the man. I hate undermining him like this, but I'm trying to be intellectually honest here the best I can. And he is as we said, Jesus personifies the ideals. And Jordan is in that position where people have mythologized him as if he's the personification of the ideals he speaks. But as we've talked about before, he doesn't personify them. He's very much someone who says, do as I say, but not as I do. And that's an interesting problem. Although he's not that bad. I keep framing it that he's like an awful tyrant with the way he does with all that stuff. But he's just a little bit rough around the edges. Like he'll be like asserting stuff like truth and logos, but then giving himself a lot of wriggle room that allows him to position himself. Oh, fuck it. Look, I don't want to bitch about them. I don't want to.
It's understandable though, because like he's taken the seat of the Messiah in a lot of people's minds. Like, who do we follow? Jordan Peterson. So of course we've been burnt on our culture. We've been burnt on our history, our values, our religion. Everything's been torn to pieces. So I think what I guess you and I and lots of other people are trying to do is to see if he will stay there as an actual Messiah figure. And it's like, well, he's not a Messiah figure because he's not perfect. He's a human being, and that's okay. Like, I think it's okay to try and, you know, to not put him up there and just praise him. It's like, what's right about him and what's wrong. And amazingly, after all the critique, I think a lot of the critique of Jordan Peterson is unbased, like jealous ex-girlfriend nonsense. It really is. It's like jealous of his success. It sincerely is. But there are some legitimate critiques of some of his stuff. You know, it's like, that's perfectly okay. What will stay and what won't, because you want something solid there to hold on to. And who can blame us when we've got nothing anymore? It's all been taken away by us, our unconscious processes, things we've developed, and by other people taking it away from us. So I can't blame you, to be honest.
Well, I'll talk about the death of the heroes briefly, and then I think we should close it. In that, two people really failed us. Like two people have been a disaster, and that has been Donald Trump and Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson less a disaster, but he was setting up this. He was speaking and he was saying, you set up your ideal, and you go for it forthrightly with truth and logos, no matter what. You aim high, man, and he puts that up there. And he's setting up this frame of excellence. But then the way it manifests is sort of like, it's okay to be okay. Don't raise your expectations, lower your standards. It sort of comes across like that a little bit. And the more you get into him, the more you realize that he is an antidote to suffering. And his antidote is to teach you how to accept mediocrity. He teaches you how to find meaning in going along and letting things work out on a basic level. Now, like, that is simplifying him a lot, but he is about compromise fundamentally. He is a man who teaches you how to compromise with grace. And that's powerful when you're at the bottom and you need to climb back up. Like when you're in a bad place, you need to stop obsessing about how you're going to be the greatest fucking boyo who's ever lived. You need to be like, fuck, how do I get back in the gym? How do I sort my fucking diet out? And how do I get like money to eat and all that stuff? That's the place you need to be. But if we're to talk about a radical shift in culture away from a fear of Western degeneration, which everybody's starting to become conscious of now, we're starting to need a little bit more than a load of people with clean rooms. Although Jordan says you'd be surprised how much that will help. I don't disagree with that. And I really hate making this black and white, but in order to critique him, you sort of have to a little bit. Like, again, you need to sit down and talk with him to really get through the nuance of it. But fundamentally, it may be more about taking a leap of faith, some sort, and going for something high and risking everything, and risk orientated behavior and hard stances, and not tolerating chitter chatter about, like, you know, gender differences and all that, and be like, no, there's root problems here that we're avoiding and all that. And he tends to avoid the root problems. That's, I guess, what I'm saying here. So he kind of felt like a letdown once you kind of click to a few anomalies with him, that he's comfortable going around their world tour and saying the same basic stuff, and he's not progressing towards anything. You realize, fuck, I'm projecting an expectation on this man, and he doesn't want to live up to it, which is fine, you know, but he's going to lose the appreciation, but that's fine. He doesn't want to be the Messiah. He just wants to tell you, you know, stay on the right track. You're not going to get that. Then Donald Trump was like proper God Emperor projections on top of him too. And he turned out to be an utter failure, like everything. He did nothing that he promised and all that. He was an utter. And Brexit's another one, man. Brexit's another great example. It's like, oh yeah, sweet. We'll democracy, and then suddenly, no, it doesn't happen. So all of these things are just falling down, and it's like people are now in a place where they need a savior. So all these things, we expected a Messiah in Trump, we expected a kingdom in Brexit, and we expected and the kingdom in Brexit was even for people all over the world as like a symbol. It's like, oh shit, they have autonomy, but no, it's failed. It's like, no, the government's owned. It's not by the people. The government is owned, and the government makes its own decisions. And Jordan was that idea. And so now, conceptualized in this in my head, I guess maybe I'm projecting my own dream onto it, but these archetypes are now empty. We had this place. We needed a Messiah, someone who was going to lead us to the kingdom. We thought it was Jordan. We thought it was Donald Trump. We thought the kingdom would be Brexit. No, none of it's going to happen. And now these places are empty. And I think the next big revolution, if you want me to make a prediction based on what I've seen, would be someone stepping in to that throne place, that archetype, that slot, and they would be the real deal. And people would get behind them almost irrationally. Like that would be a movement like nothing you've ever seen. And that happened before. And it's happened all throughout history. That is a human universal, is that some great leader shows up and leads people towards the kingdom. It always happens. And so I think we're starting to get pushed in a position where that's a realistic thing to think about. As in to say realistic that's something that will happen. It's almost like it's psychological destiny now, because so many chess pieces have been moved in certain places that I don't really see any other way it's going to work, you know? So I'm very interested watching for that, because people are over in America, like you see the Yang gang, they're going to vote for this guy for the universal basic income because they want to create enough chaos. And what do they want? They want eventually a strong leader to rise out of it. So, my thoughts there anyway.
No, they were very, very good thoughts. You've just proven the absolute predictive power of Jung, that we yearn for these particular things. It's like, why did Trump fill that hole? Why did Peterson fill that hole? Yeah. So of course the establishment's like, well, because you're all a racist piece of shit. It's like, no, you're not. And you know you're not if you actually understand human psychology, even in a slight cursory manner. It's like we're constantly looking for a kingdom. We're constantly looking for a Messiah. But I guess I'd add one final thing to that, and you might disagree with this. I don't think we'll actually ever find it, not in an actual human, because then that's not quite the Messiah itself. The whole point of Jesus is like, okay, I am the Messiah. You follow me. Everything else is just leading up to me returning, kingdom come. So when you have Jordan Peterson taking the throne, as St. Augustine was saying in this particular paragraph, he was like, the human being is not the God image. It's like an image of the God image. So there's Jordan who's there, and he's still flawed, and he's still, he was an obscure professor for a while, working himself to death, and then suddenly he's dropped into this, and I think he's handled it brilliantly well. Like, would you do any better? No. Would I do any better? No. But at the same time, he's just another human being, right? So maybe what we need is the dream human being, which is actually crystallized in the form of a metaphysic religion that sits atop the throne rather than a real human being. Now, which, of course, begs the question, what the hell would Christ actually be if he was a real human being? Because then the only way what I've just said can work is if Christ was literally the Son of God, which is really fun to think about.
Do you know what I think is that in order for people in high status positions to understand their position, they need to understand what gets projected onto them. Like Jordan getting up there needs to become conscious of the fact that if you're going to stand up there, you're going to have this energy projected onto you. And what he does is he speaks down to the people who project this energy onto them and say to them, you're like, it's your fault that you believe in me. And it's kind of that's kind of a horrible thing to say, because like, Jordan's like, I've got 150 IQ and all that stuff. Most people don't have that. Most people aren't capable of saving themselves as much as we'd like to think. People can do a lot. I don't want to disempower people. People are strong and capable a lot more than they think. But at the same time, you do need leaders to save you. You do need people to run the fucking government. You know what I mean? You need people to be running shit. And therefore you project a huge amount of energy onto the people who are positioned to run shit. And anybody who gets in those positions, they need to take on that burden of responsibility and say, people have their faith in me. Like that is a karmic energy like you cannot believe. People are like, a lot's riding on your ability to win here. And if you bow to that pressure, that's a very big signal of a weak character. And that's a big statement for me to make, because I'm not sure I do any better. But that's sort of what I'm getting at there. And then lastly, the last thing to say is that perhaps a Messiah would come, but the thing is that he would bow to Jesus. There's an interesting thought.
Oh,
He would say, I'm the perfect man for the moment, but I'm not the perfect man. I bow to this man, like Constantine did. People, on that bombshell, I'd really like to end it. I got stuff to do. Maybe if Owen Benjamin and Jordan Peterson had a baby, that's fucking right. That would be great. That'd be great. James, any last words?
And yeah, synthesis between Owen Benjamin and Jordan Peterson would be very, very fun to see. I think Owen needs a big cuddle. I really do. I'd love to have Owen with me right now to give him a big hug and say, Owen, it's okay. Like you've been attacked and you've had everything taken from you, but it's okay. Calm down. Have a beer with me, please. But apart from that, I really enjoyed this lecture today. Thank you for taking time out of your day, Stefan. And thank you, beautiful people. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Tribe of Boyos, stay well. We'll talk to you later. COD Wars, remember it. Never forget the COD War when Iceland bet England. That is what matters. People, talk to you later. Bye-bye.